Chapter 14:16. Roar. A ferocious roar exploded in the sky above the demon race's camp, shaking the heavens and the earth. Formless sound waves spread out, creating a violent hurricane in the sky. The bloodlight that covered the sky flew to the outside of Tianlong Pass in the blink of an eye. Swoosh! The monstrous blood-red light suddenly converged and condensed into a tall and sturdy figure, standing still 5 kilometers in front of the emperor. It was a demon race man in a purple robe. He was more than 3 meters tall, and his skin was dark and covered with black dragon scales. He had 2 huge heads, and his face was resolute and dignified. His snow-white hair danced in the wind, and a pair of black azura wings behind his back, surrounded by a dense demon chi. He was like a demon azura that walked out of hell, exuding an extremely powerful and bloodthirsty aura. Without a doubt, he was the leader of the demon race, the ancient demon emperor. The demon emperor stood proudly in the night sky and looked at the emperor with a cold smile. Long Xuankuan, we meet again. It's been 1,000 years, and you still haven't forgotten the grudge of breaking your bones, right? The demon emperor's tone was full of sarcasm. The emperor's face darkened, and his eyes were filled with hatred and murderous intent. He said coldly, "Demon emperor, 1,000 years ago, you brought me pain and humiliation, and I will remember it forever. Back then, you were so powerful that you broke all my bones and made me lose face, and I was powerless to take revenge. But today, I will avenge my past humiliation and tear you to pieces." As he spoke, the emperor held the scabbard of the human sovereign sword tightly with his left hand, and the hilt with his right hand. He slowly pulled out the golden blade. The demon emperor looked at him with a cold smile and said disdainfully, "Ha ha ha, it seems like you have forgotten the pain after your wounds have healed. How dare you talk nonsense to me? If that's the case, not only will I kill you, but I will also crush all your bones and flesh before I kill you." After saying that, the demon emperor raised his wide sleeves and struck out a mysterious spell with his palms. Instantly, 2 balls of fiery red light were released and blasted toward the demon emperor. The emperor roared with murderous intent. He immediately waved the emperor's sword and slashed out a few sword lights that could split the sky and earth, blasting towards the 2 balls of bloodlight. Bang bang! The sword light and the bloodlight collided, creating a deafening sound that reverberated in the night sky. The imperial emperor's figure flashed and teleported hundreds of miles away, arriving in the distant sky. The demon emperor laughed maniacally. He turned into a streak of blood-red light and chased after him, engaging in an intense battle with him in the sky. Both of them were primordial spirit realm supremes and were the strongest experts on the battlefield. Only the sky thousands of miles above the ground was their battlefield. High up in the night sky, there was a terrifyingly low temperature. Astral winds that were as sharp as swords and blades. There was also an invisible power of heaven and earth that fiercely suppressed everything. Only Essence Soul Realm experts could move about and fight in the heavenly constellation atmosphere. Both of them used their secret techniques and released destructive attacks as they fought fiercely high up in the sky. Loud rumbling sounds that sounded like divine thunder from the 9 heavens reverberated in the sky, spreading for tens of thousands of miles. Dazzling spell lights tore through the night sky like lightning, crisscrossing and flashing in the night sky. Both of them exchanged more than 100 blows. After a fierce clash, they quickly separated and faced each other from 20 miles away. The demon emperor's face was slightly pale and his hair was a little messy. After panting for a while, his dermic powers and aura stabilized. He formed a spell with his left hand and held the emperor's sword in his right. He pointed it at the demon emperor and shouted expressionlessly, "Demon emperor, I heard that you have obtained a heaven-defying divine artifact that is extremely powerful. If you don't use it now, I'm afraid you won't have another chance." The demon emperor's purple robe was also a little messy. His long hair was wrapped around his neck and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. After exchanging more than 100 blows with the demon emperor, he didn't gain any advantage. Instead, he was at a disadvantage. After all, he had only recovered his strength to the 5th level of the primordial spirit realm, which was not much different from the demon emperor. However, the demon emperor was holding the emperor's sword and he didn't use any divine artifact. Naturally, he was slightly injured. Hearing the demon emperor's words, the demon emperor raised his sleeve to wipe the blood at the corner of his mouth. He grinned and sneered, "Ha! Long Xuankuan, since you already know that I have a heaven-defying divine artifact, you should know what happened to Gu Daoxian, right? I still want to play with you a little longer." I didn't expect you to be so eager to die. As he spoke, he slowly raised his left palm and a ball of dazzling purple light surged out of his palm. Amidst the purple light, a dark purple ruler that was about 5 feet long and as wide as a palm gradually appeared. It was an exquisite purple ruler. It was straight and narrow, and its surface was engraved with ancient divine runes and symbols that flickered with purple light. Even if the demon emperor didn't activate the ruler's power, the ruler would still emit an extremely cold qi that slowly spread in the night sky. The night sky within a radius of dozens of miles started to distort silently as if it couldn't bear the weight and was about to be torn apart by the might of the ruler. Without a doubt, this was the heaven-defying divine artifact, the great soul-severing ruler. The demon emperor placed his left hand behind his back and held the soul-severing ruler in his right hand. He exuded a strong sense of confidence as he smirked and swung the ruler at the demon emperor. Long Xuanquan, suffer my wrath. Soul-severing. A dazzling purple light blade shot out from the great soul-severing ruler. It instantly pierced through the dark night sky and arrived in front of the demon emperor. The demon emperor's face turned very serious as he stared at the purple light blade. He didn't dare to let his guard down at all. When the light blade came, he didn't hesitate to block it with the emperor's sword. Bam! Amidst the deafening noise, the giant purple blade struck the human sovereign's sword hard, bursting out golden and purple light that blotted out the sky and earth. The demon emperor was immediately sent flying. The emperor's sword also trembled incessantly and let out a mournful buzzing sound. He was sent tumbling for dozens of miles. His face turned pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His primordial spirit was also enveloped by the extremely cold qi as his entire body trembled. Before he could regain his footing, the demon emperor teleported over and swung the great soul-severing ruler again. Soul-severing. A purple light blade that was 1,000 feet long instantly traversed the night sky and struck the demon emperor in the waist. The demon emperor couldn't resist at all and was sent flying again. His magic power shield was shattered into pieces, and a large crack appeared on his armor and golden cloak. However, these were only external injuries. What was more serious was that his primordial spirit was severely damaged and his consciousness was a little blurry. Ha ha ha! Long Xuanquan, do you know the power of the great soul-severing ruler now? The demon emperor laughed maniacally as he chased after Long Xuanquan and swung the soul-severing ruler again. Explode! Chapter 14:17. At the critical moment, the emperor cast a spell and took out a simple and mottled bronze mirror. It was a round bronze mirror with ancient patterns carved on its edges. This ancient bronze mirror was an immortal soul-level magic treasure. Its origins were extremely ancient, and it exuded an aura of vicissitudes that only ancient treasures possessed. The arch injected his dharma power into it and turned it into the size of a millstone, blocking in front of him. Boom! The purple light shot out from the soul-severing ruler hit the bronze mirror, creating an earth-shattering sound that spread for 1,000 miles. Crack! With a crisp cracking sound, the ancient bronze mirror was shattered on the spot, exploding into hundreds of fragments that scattered in all directions. This ancient essence soul dharma treasure was destroyed just like that. A primal-level quasi-god artifact was actually so weak and unable to withstand a single blow from a true heaven-defying god artifact. Fortunately, the arch sacrificed an essence soul dharma treasure to stop the Fiend King's attack. He finally recovered and quickly used a secret technique to summon his essence soul dharma form. Universe as me, Dragon Court Dharma form. The emperor's voice was as loud as a bell. Dazzling golden light burst out from his body, surging with incomparably powerful divine power fluctuations. A giant golden shadow as large as a mountain immediately lit up the night sky behind him and let out a bright golden light. It was a giant that was 1,000 feet tall and wearing golden armor. It had a body as majestic as a mountain, 8 huge and sturdy arms, and a dark golden dragon head. Each arm was carved with ancient runes that contained the crystallization of 10,000 years of human wisdom and sealed with hundreds of secret techniques. On the giant golden dragon head, 2 coral-like golden dragon horns flashed with golden light, and the power of heaven and earth constantly moved. Without a doubt, this was the Thearka's essence soul dharma form, the legendary 8-armed dragon court dharma form, which represented the supreme power and power. It opened its wide dragon mouth and spewed out endless golden fire towards the Fiend King. The night sky within a radius of 10,000 miles was illuminated by the dazzling golden flames. The terrifyingly high temperature dispelled the horrifying astral wind and cold air. Even the mountains within 10,000 miles were quickly melted by the golden fire and turned into lava and ashes. However, the Fiend King didn't seem worried at all. He was still full of confidence, and an overbearing energy came out of his body. He waved his hand and swung the Tyene soul-severing ruler, releasing purple light and demonic mist. Swish, swish, swish. The purple light and demonic mist that blotted out the sky immediately enveloped the glazed fire. The two energies cancelled each other out and soon dissipated. Ha ha ha. Long Xuanquan, stop resisting. Even if you detonate your essence soul dharma form, you won't be able to hurt me. The power of the Tyene soul-severing ruler is not something you can imagine. Dang! The demonic emperor sneered arrogantly. He kept swinging the Tyene soul-sundering ruler, slashing out huge purple blades that blotted out the sky. He launched a ferocious attack on the emperor. He hurriedly used his essence soul dharma form and used all kinds of secret techniques of heaven and earth. The Dragon Court Dharma form extended its 8 arms and used 8 essence soul dharma treasures to unleash a barrage of attacks. Some of the arms wielded sabers, swords and axes, slashing out 10,000 feet long golden light blades to meet the oncoming purple light head-on. Some of the arms opened their glazed bottles and black water poured out of them. 2 of the arms waved ancient battle flags and struck a huge ancient bell to unleash divine sense shockwaves to attack the Fiend King's divine sense. The Celestial Emperor fought the Devil Emperor with all his might, and once again, they engaged in an intense battle. After about a quarter of an hour, the two of them had exchanged over 100 blows and the victor was finally decided. The Fiend King was sent flying again with blood gushing from his nose and mouth. His robe was tattered and his hair was disheveled. His Dragon Court Dharma form had also expended 60% of its power and its golden light had dimmed. 2 of the Dharma form's arms had been severed and a crack had appeared on its massive dragon head. However, the Fiend King wasn't injured. He used the Tyene soul-severing ruler to block the Fiend King's secret techniques and continued to pursue the Fiend King. As time passed, the Fiend King's injuries worsened and his essence soul became weaker. He knew very well that even the Prefecture Lord was no match for the Fiend King, let alone him. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated. All he could do was to stall the ancient Fiend King and stall for time as much as possible. The later Heaven Dragon Pass was breached, the more preparations Zhongzhou could make, and the more human warriors they could gather. Thus, the Fiend King changed his battle strategy and stopped fighting the Fiend King head-on. He used the Dragon Court Dharma form to unleash all kinds of secret techniques to stall the Fiend King. This way, even if the Fiend King had the Tyene soul-severing ruler and could unleash devastating attacks, he wouldn't be able to kill him in a short time. He fought as he retreated. With Tianlong Pass as the center, he shuttled and dodged in the sky. Before he knew it, an entire night had passed. The Fiend King held on stubbornly and was still fighting the Fiend King. The Fiend King didn't seem to be in a hurry to kill him. He was confident and kept injuring and repelling him while mocking him. The Fiend King didn't understand why the Fiend King was doing this. He only thought that the Fiend King wanted to slowly torture and kill him to vent his anger. It wasn't until the sun rose and he saw the scene outside Tianlong Pass that he finally understood. The sky around Tianlong Pass was shrouded in a torrential bloodlight. The battle on the battlefield had yet to end. Earth-shattering shouts and explosions could be heard incessantly. After a night of fierce battle, the Fiend army had lost nearly 2 million people. The human army had also lost more than 800,000 people. The 100-kilometer canyon outside Tianlong Pass was littered with corpses. In many low-lying areas, the corpses piled up into small mountains and the blood converged into rivers of blood. It was a scene of carnage both inside and outside Tianlong Pass. Thick blood energy floated in the air and condensed into blood clouds and blood mist, giving off a pungent smell of blood. That was the blood energy and souls of millions of corpses. It was a great tonic for the fiend race. But what was strange was that when the biting cold north wind blew, the blood mist that shrouded the world didn't dissipate, nor did it flow to the south. Instead, it surged up into the sky. The Celestial Emperor looked up along the surging blood mist and saw the gigantic blood-colored pillar of light and the towering figure of the demon god. The endless blood mist rushed towards the fiend god's shadow like a tide and was swallowed by it. Seeing this scene, the Fiend King was startled for a moment. Then, he understood something and his expression changed. Xitigarbha has been in the netherworld for 30,000 years. The primordial fiend god hasn't fully awakened. It still needs 3 more days to absorb endless blood energy and souls to condense a Dharma body and become a primordial spirit sovereign. No wonder the Fiend King wasn't in a hurry to break through Tianlong Pass. Chapter 14:18. The Celestial Emperor saw through the Demon Emperor's intentions and schemes. He did his best to use a secret technique, slashing out a dozen sword lights that could split the heavens and earth, slashing at the sky-reaching pillar of light and the demon god Phantom. No matter what, he had to do his best to stop the Demon Emperor's plans and destroy the ancestral demon god's avatar. But things did not go as he wished. The Demon Emperor swung the extreme soul-severing ruler again and again, slashing out giant purple blades that covered the sky, intercepting him from the side. With a series of muffled bangs, the sword light that the Imperial Emperor had slashed out was shattered into pieces that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. He was unwilling to give up and wanted to attack again, destroying the Demon Emperor's schemes. But the Demon Emperor kept him occupied, launching fierce and tyrannical attacks, forcing him back again and again. Soon, the Celestial Emperor was riddled with wounds and could only fight the Demon Emperor. With the extreme soul-severing ruler, the Demon Emperor was in an undefeatable position. No matter what the Celestial Emperor used, no matter what trump cards or treasures he used, he could not defeat the Demon Emperor. All he could do was keep the Demon Emperor occupied, stalling for time until the final moment. Inside and outside the Heaven Dragon Pass, on the battlefield of several hundred li, the great battle was still ongoing. Endless demon soldiers charged at the Heaven Dragon Pass without any regard for their own safety, attacking the defensive array with all their might. The human soldiers held on with all their might, constantly providing energy for the defensive array. As time passed, the defensive array was constantly broken and repaired. In the process, countless human soldiers charged onto the battlefield, ultimately sacrificing their lives. Millions of incomplete corpses were lying outside the Tianlong Mountain Pass. Countless broken limbs and blood rained down. What a tragic scene of purgatory on earth. At the same time, the central state city was completely silent and bleak. The biting cold northern wind whistled, sweeping up yellow leaves and dust, scattering them all over the central state city. The empty streets and alleys, the dust-filled plazas that no one cleaned, and the many magnificent palaces had all become dim and lifeless. Other than the soldiers who were still guarding the city walls, there were very few civilians left in the city. At most there were 300,000 to 500,000 people. In the past, the prosperous central state city had been home to 3 to 5 million martial artists and civilians of various races. Now, there were only 300,000 to 500,000 people left. 9 out of 10 houses were empty. Inside the imperial residence, in the quiet imperial palace, Ji Tianqing, the mansion master, and the others were still in the secret chamber. Only 2 days had passed in the outside world, but another 20 days had passed in the secret room. Ji Tianqing spent a total of 20 days, enduring all kinds of pain and torment before he finally broke through the shackles of the Essence Soul realm. That night, he finally crossed the invisible chasm and successfully reached the first firmament of the Essence Spirit realm. At that moment, the monstrous amount of spiritual energy that he had accumulated inside his body gushed out like a flood and spread out in all directions. Boom! Amidst an invisible muffled sound, a golden light burst out from his body, illuminating the entire secret room. At that moment, his robes fluttered violently as he erupted with a peerlessly violent aura. The dazzling golden light illuminated the sky outside the secret chamber, illuminating the sky for thousands of miles. The entire imperial residence was enveloped in the golden light. The dazzling golden light surged violently, constantly condensing into various scenes. There were divine beasts and birds the size of mountains, dense ancient trees and strange flowers, wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, as well as the vicissitudes of life. It was especially mysterious. Divine Master Blackfeather had already returned to the imperial residence with more than 30 princes. Everyone was recuperating in their respective palaces. The sudden appearance of the heaven and earth phenomenon immediately woke everyone up. When everyone saw the golden light and the phenomenon, they revealed looks of disbelief and shock. Such an earth-shattering phenomenon lasted for an entire day without dissipating. In the secret chamber, Ji Tianqing's body was also undergoing tremendous changes. After he broke through to the first firmament of the Essence Soul realm, the heaven and earth phenomenon appeared. His body was also rapidly condensing an Essence Soul Dharma characteristic. If he had not cultivated the mystic technique that the mansion master had imparted to him, he would naturally not have been able to condense an essence soul dharma characteristic. He would have needed a long period of cultivation and experimentation. Take Xue Ruoyu for example. Although she was at the first firmament of the essence soul realm, she had never condensed an essence soul. Ji Tianxing was different. He had already comprehended the true self dharma characteristic that the abode master had imparted to him. By cultivating this mystic technique, he could use the essence of the mystic technique to condense his own unique essence soul dharma characteristic. That was the dharma characteristic that was most suitable for him. For 10 whole days, he had been circulating the true self dharma characteristic mystic technique. He adjusted the dharmic powers in his body, his divine soul, and his dharmic swords, constantly fusing them. This process was a little slow, but it was also extremely complicated and precise. There was no room for error or negligence. Unknowingly, 10 days had passed. Ji Tianxing's 9 divine soul dharmic swords, 1 divine soul golden sword, and his lifetime of dharmic powers were perfectly fused together, forming a ball of golden light that seemed to condense into a substance. Within the golden light, a mysterious white pearl was enveloped. It spun rapidly, undergoing a deep level of fusion and transformation. That pearl was naturally the mysterious heaven-mending pearl. Day after day passed, the golden ball of light gradually changed, clearly showing the appearance of an essence soul. It was a dark golden sword. The blade of the sword was moderate in length and slightly wider than an ordinary sword. The blade was covered with mysterious patterns. An ancient and mysterious pattern appeared on the hilt of the sword. Complicated lines outlined the appearance of a golden divine dragon and a fire phoenix. At the intersection of the golden hilt and the blade, there was a mysterious white pearl that was emitting a dense white light. That was the heaven-mending pearl. It had already fused with Ji Tianxing's essence soul dharma characteristic. This simple and mysterious golden sword was Ji Tianxing's essence soul dharma characteristic. It floated quietly in his mind. When he finished cultivating and saw the essence soul dharma characteristic in his mind, he was stunned on the spot. Strange, other people's essence soul dharma characteristics are in the form of giants like the 8-armed deity, the 4-winged giant beast, or the 6-eyed dharma eye. Why is my dharma characteristic so strange? It's actually a golden sword? What kind of essence soul dharma characteristic is this? What's the difference between this and the divine soul golden sword? Just as he was filled with doubts and muttering to himself, the essence soul golden sword in his mind suddenly changed. Swoosh! That dark golden essence soul golden sword suddenly turned into a small golden man. The golden man was a handsome and valiant young man. His appearance, and demeanor were exactly the same as him. There was no difference at all. When he frowned, the essence soul golden sword frowned. When he grinned, the essence soul golden sword grinned as well. In short, the essence soul golden sword was a miniature version of him. Wow, this essence soul is a little strange. It can change at will? Ji Tianxing was instantly interested. He used his mind to control the essence soul golden sword and tried to see if there were any other changes. With a thought in his mind, the dark golden nascent divinity immediately turned into 9 golden divine swords. Chapter 14:19. My primordial spirit dharma idol is actually so amazing? Seeing the primordial spirit in his mind constantly changing, Ji Tianxing was instantly shocked. He only felt that it was unbelievable. When he cultivated the true self dharma idol, he only formed the dharma idol naturally according to his heart, talent, and the characteristics of his cultivation technique. Before the primordial spirit dharma idol was successfully formed, he did not know what kind of dharma idol he would form. Now that the dharma idol was successfully formed, he realized that his primordial spirit dharma idol was completely different from others. The true self dharma idol that the mansion master taught me is really a marvelous cultivation technique. It actually allowed me to form such a strange dharma idol. With a thought, I can make it change at will. It can become a small golden person or a golden divine sword. It can even split into 81 divine swords. In that case, when I use the divine lightning sword domain in the future, won't I be able to use the 81 golden swords as the foundation to increase the power of the domain? Thinking of this, he carefully examined the 81 golden swords. Indeed, he found that the golden swords contained the purple light of divine lightning. Moreover, the power of the heaven-mending pearl also filled the golden swords with mysterious and unpredictable power. This discovery made Ji Tianxing excited and full of anticipation. Great! The ninth heaven's divine lightning and the heaven-mending pearl are both powers that can restrain demon experts. Now that these two powers have merged into my primordial spirit golden swords, it will be much easier for me to deal with demon experts in the future. After breaking through to the primordial spirit realm, his strength had increased by several times. His dermic powers had also undergone a qualitative leap. The ninth heaven's divine lightning and the heaven-mending pearl had caused his primordial spirit to undergo miraculous changes, increasing his combat strength. If he encountered Devil Blood and Venerable Bloodkiller again, he was 100% confident that he could kill them. After a long time, the heaven and earth phenomenon that illuminated the entire Emperor Manor dissipated. Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and continued to receive the Mansion Master and the other three's imparting. Breaking through to the primordial spirit realm was far from enough. It was still not enough to fight against the Demon Emperor. The Mansion Master and the other three had only imparted about 30% of their powers to him. Of course they had to continue imparting. Their goal was to impart their lifetime's powers to Ji Tianqing so that he could reach the level where he could kill the Demon Emperor. Ji Tianqing continued to cultivate, quickly refining the Manor Head and the other three Manor Heads' powers. Previously, he was only in the soul refinement realm, so the speed at which he received the energy imparting was very slow. It would take a very long time for him to refine it. However, things were different now. After he reached the primordial soul realm, he was like an abyss vortex, constantly devouring the Four's powers and rapidly refining them. With the passage of time, his martial Dao foundation stabilized. His strength began to increase rapidly as he headed towards the second firmament essence soul realm. A month had passed in the Arch Palace's secret chamber, but only 3 days had passed in the outside world. That evening, the setting sun was like blood. The dark red afterglow sprinkled over the Tianlong mountain pass, illuminating the battlefield within a radius of several hundred miles. The battle lasted for 3 whole days. Finally, it was coming to an end. Blood clouds filled the sky, and no matter how strong the northern wind was, they would not disperse. That towering blood-red pillar of light and the gigantic demon god Shadow were still standing tall in the sky. On the battlefield below, it was an extremely tragic scene. The huge Tianlong mountain pass had long been destroyed in the war and turned into a huge crater. The mountain range within a radius of a few hundred miles had been reduced to piles of dirt and ruins. Dense cracks appeared on the ground, and many deep pits were scattered all over the ground. Countless human and demon corpses were piled up on the ground, buried in the deep craters or ruins. Most of the corpses were incomplete, and their flesh had rotted away, leaving behind only skeletons. The blood, qi and essence of more than 5 million corpses had turned into blood clouds and blood mist that converged towards the demon god Shadow like a tide. The ancestor demon god needed to reach the heavens for 3 days and condense an avatar with countless blood, qi, and essence. Be it the blood of the human soldiers or the souls of the demon soldiers, they were all raw materials to condense an avatar. There was not much of a difference. This was the demon emperor's plan and conspiracy. In order to allow the ancestor demon god to be reborn, he would not hesitate to sacrifice millions of demon soldiers. The most terrifying thing about the demons was that they were not only ruthless to outsiders, but also to their own people. The battle was finally over. The Tianlong mountain pass was completely destroyed. The battle between the Empyrean Emperor and the Demon Emperor had long ended. The battle cries that resounded through the sky lasted for 3 days and 3 nights before finally dissipating. More than 2 million soldiers of the human clan were almost completely annihilated. Only 6 commanders, tens of imperial guards, over 200 human commanders and over 1,000 powerful human warriors were left alive, and they could still leave the Heaven Dragon Pass alive. But all of them were seriously injured and bathed in blood. Their injuries were very miserable. They had no time to treat their injuries. After retreating according to the order, they quickly gathered under the oath-taking platform in the middle of the camp. On the spacious and sacred oath-taking platform stood the Empyrean Emperor and the Imperial Tutor. Both of them were covered in blood. Their robes were torn and tattered, and their hair was disheveled. They looked very miserable. The atmosphere was very heavy and oppressive. The 1,000 or so people who were lucky enough to survive were also very despaired. Everyone was dejected, and their eyes were dim. The Empyrean Emperor's sword in his left hand and raised his right hand to wipe off the blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. He ordered with a hoarse voice, "Soldiers, the battle is over. The Tianlong mountain pass has fallen. This was the result that was predestined. Everyone's mission has been completed. We have stopped the devil army for 3 days. From now on, everyone must hurry back to the central state city. I have already made preparations and arrangements. Our human soldiers will gather there and start the final battle with the devil army. The deep and majestic voice spread around the oath-taking platform. More than 1,000 human soldiers slowly raised their heads to look at the Empyrean Emperor. The fire of hope was reignited in their eyes. Then, the Empyrean Emperor took the imperial tutor and the others and left the oath-taking platform. They rushed back to the central state city in the south. The 6 commanders also took more than 1,000 survivors and followed them back to the central state city. At the same time, in the devil camp outside the Tianlong mountain pass, the 18 million demon soldiers were divided into 20 armies and lined up near the various mountain peaks. Everyone's blood was boiling. Full of excitement, they let out earth-shaking cheers and shouts to celebrate the victory of the war. Our race will win. Kill all the humans. The Tianlong mountain pass has been destroyed. Soon, we will step into the central state and rule the entire Tianxian land. Your Majesty, the Devil Emperor is wise and mighty. Waves of cheers rose and fell one after another. They converged into a sound wave torrent that reverberated above the devil camp. The Devil Emperor stood proudly high in the sky. Looking down at the devil army that was cheering excitedly, a playful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. After a long while, he withdrew his gaze and turned to look at the demonic god's shadow high in the sky. That demonic god's shadow had been in the sky for 3 days. It had absorbed the blood, chi and soul of millions of soldiers. Chapter 14:20. About an hour later, the ancestral fiend god's blood demon avatar was finally condensed. Roar! The fiend god avatar, which had not moved for 3 days, was finally able to move on its own. It twisted its body a few times, stretched its arms and head, and let out an earth-shaking roar. The deafening sound spread over a radius of 10,000 miles. Then, the fiend god avatar opened its arms, as if it was embracing the sky, and laughed wildly. Ha 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 ha! 30,000 years. After 30,000 years, this god has returned. The death god has returned to the human world, and darkness will once again envelop the world. Gods, do you see this? Only this god is eternal and immortal, undying and indestructible. The fiend god's wild laughter was filled with hatred and killing intent, as well as incomparable excitement and ecstasy. His thunderous voice reverberated fiercely in the sky, shaking the heavens and the earth for thousands of miles around. In the demon race's camp, more than 10 million demon soldiers raised their heads to look at the sky, looking at the ancestral fiend god with worship and reverence. The demon emperor in the sky was the first to bow, respectfully saluting the fiend god avatar. Welcome back to the human world, ancestral fiend god, and revitalize our race. As the demon emperor's shout resounded through the sky, more than 10 million demon soldiers also knelt on the ground, saluting with great reverence. Welcome back to the human world, ancestral fiend god, and revitalize our race. Heaven bless our race, and our race will sweep across the world and unify the world. The shouts of more than 10 million people converged into a terrifying sound wave, spreading in all directions. The earth within 10,000 miles shook as if an earthquake had occurred. After a long time, the fiend god avatar gradually shrank into a bloody light, retreating into the depths of the demon race's camp. After the bloody light entered the primogenitor altar, it immediately disappeared. Then, a tall figure in a black robe walked out of the primogenitor altar. This was the ancestral fiend god's true body, a body condensed from 4 divine items. In the sky above the surface, the demon emperor looked toward the south, and ordered with a booming voice, "All soldiers listen to my order. After resting for half a day, we will march into the central province." Along the way, no matter if it was a village or a city, no one was left alive. Within 2 months, this emperor's army will descend upon Central Continent City. The army of over 10 million demons excitedly waved their weapons and shouted, "Yes, sir." Unknowingly, 5 days had passed. The emperor, the imperial tutor, and more than 1,000 survivors had all returned to the Central Plains. At the same time, the news that Heavenlong Pass had fallen and millions of human soldiers had been annihilated spread across the Central Plains. As early as 2 months ago, the hundreds of cities in the Central Plains were already in a state of panic. Most of the martial artists and commoners had already left the city in advance and fled to the south. Less than 10% of the warriors and commoners were left behind in the cities. Most of them were the defenders. Now that the news of Tianlong Mountain Pass's fall had spread, less than 10% of the cultivators and common people had given up their last glimmer of hope and fled to the south. The imperial emperor didn't return to the imperial court. Instead, he stayed in Central State City and used the city lord's mansion as a temporary commander's palace. This Central State City, which had been passed down through the ages, would be the site of the decisive battle between the human race and the demon race. After returning to Central State City, the imperial emperor first issued a series of orders. He first gave the order for the Central Continent 100 cities to abandon the various cities and gather in Central Continent City. In addition, the defenders of the 9 regions of the south and the recruited warriors also received his orders and rushed to Central State City. In addition to these orders, the imperial emperor also summoned the skilled craftsmen and array masters of the human race to strengthen the defenses of Central State City and construct a powerful defensive array. In just a few days, hundreds of thousands of warriors and craftsmen rushed to the deserted Central State City. Everyone was full of enthusiasm, wholeheartedly throwing themselves into the construction of the city's defenses. They were doing their best to resist the demon race and protect the territory of the human race. Every day, large amounts of martial artists and human soldiers would rush to Central Continent City from all directions. 10 days later, more than 5 million warriors and soldiers had gathered in Central State City. The empty houses and buildings were now occupied by many soldiers and martial artists. Thus, the imperial tutor and several commanders worked together to use a secret technique. Under Central State City, they constructed an underground city of the same scale. This underground city was extremely large, but the construction was extremely simple. It was built like a military camp, specifically used to house the great army of the human race. Several days later, the construction of the underground city was completed. The human race soldiers that arrived in Central State City were arranged to stay in the underground city. Apart from these important matters, the imperial emperor, the imperial tutor, and the commanders also had to worry about all kinds of trivial matters. For example, the warriors and soldiers that came from all over the world, how should they be arranged and who would lead them? Tens of millions of warriors and soldiers were stationed in Central State City. How should they deal with the supply of provisions and cultivation resources? In short, Central State City quickly recovered its bustling scene. The voices of people were loud and bustling. However, the warriors and soldiers were not undisciplined. Everyone's morale was high, their nerves stretched taut. They maintained vigilance, ready to fight at any time. The imperial tutor and the commanders would also frequently mobilize the soldiers, having everyone mentally prepare themselves, vowing to live and die with Central State City. A month quickly passed. Tens of millions of warriors gathered in Central State City, as well as hundreds of thousands of martial experts and talented individuals. The city wall's defenses were doubled and several primordial spirit-level defensive formations were also completed, operating normally. The imperial emperor and the commanders, after exhausting themselves for so long, could finally properly rest and adjust their breathing. At the same time, the scouts on the front lines continuously sent news back to the city, reporting the latest movements of the demon race army. Heaven Dragon Pass was 1 million li away from Central State City. The demon race army was 18 million strong. Even if they traveled at full speed, it would still take them more than a month. Moreover, as the demon race army marched south, they plundered countless villages and cities, exterminating all life forms. According to the news from the scouts, the demon race army would need at least 20 days to reach Central State City. In other words, there was less than a month until the final battle. The situation in Central State City became more and more tense, the atmosphere becoming more and more oppressive. However, all of the human race soldiers believed that even the imperial emperor, the imperial tutor, the son of heaven, and the other leaders of the human race would defend Central State City to the death, fighting side by side with them. Even if they died in battle, they would have no regrets. A few days later, the Monster Emperor and Golden Dragon Emperor's secret messages also flew into Central State City, reaching the imperial emperor's hands. Chapter 14:21. The atmosphere in Zhongzhou City was heavy and solemn. The divine masters and princes in the imperial residence were not idle either. After they had recovered from their injuries, they worked together to cast spells to strengthen the defense of the imperial residence. Zhongzhou City was the location of the final battle, and the imperial residence was the final fortress. Everyone was so busy that they almost forgot about the imperial palace in the depths of the imperial residence. It was not until noon that the imperial palace lit up with golden light that the divine masters and princes were awakened. Divine Master Yu was meditating in the spacious hall. He suddenly sensed the change in the weather and immediately opened his eyes. Swoosh! His figure flashed and teleported out. He stood under the eaves of the hall's entrance and looked up at the sky. At the same time, a few divine masters and more than 30 princes flew into the sky and looked up at the sky. They saw a golden pillar of light that was tens of thousands of feet tall shoot up into the sky and spread out in the sky. The dazzling golden light illuminated the heavens and the earth for thousands of miles. It almost lit up the entire imperial residence. The golden light emitted a powerful and sacred aura that shrouded the heavens and the earth. Everyone was in awe. Of course, that invisible pressure contained some kind of law. It was a powerful force of heaven and earth. It would not suppress the divine masters and princes, nor would it make them feel uncomfortable. Soon, the golden light in the sky spread out and formed a golden sea of clouds that was thousands of miles wide. Above the sea of clouds, the dark golden light condensed into a huge figure that stood tall. The god masters and princes could clearly see that the 30,000-foot-tall figure was a handsome young man. He stood in the golden sea of clouds, and his tall figure seemed to be connected to the heavens. He formed a seal with both hands and made a mysterious pose. His left hand pointed to the sky and his right hand pointed to the ground. He exuded a godlike aura. The martial emperors and martial monarchs' sons were astounded when they saw the beast's appearance. Many of them even exclaimed, "Oh my god! It's Ji Tianxing? He just broke through to the primordial soul realm a month ago and caused a heaven and earth phenomenon. What kind of divine art did he cultivate now? The heaven and earth phenomenon this time is even more powerful than when he broke through to the primordial soul realm. He must have cultivated a peerless divine art. Great! Ji Tianxing has broken through to the essence soul realm and even mastered a peerless technique. He'll definitely be able to deal with the ancient fiend emperor. Ji Tianxing, this fellow, is indeed the #1 monster since ancient times. He has only been in the monarch residence for a few years, but he has already become a primordial soul supremacy. Many god-tier masters and crown princes gathered together. They were all shocked and exclaimed as they whispered to each other. However, everyone was excited and proud of Ji Tianxing. Almost no one was jealous of him. After all, he had already become a primordial soul supreme and stood at the pinnacle of the continent. Everyone could only look up to and worship him. They didn't even have the right to be jealous of him. Divine Master Blackfeather stared at the huge figure high in the sky. His single eye shone brightly. His hands in his sleeves were trembling because of excitement. Great! Tianxing had finally condensed his avatar. This fellow just broke through to the essence soul realm not long ago, but he actually condensed his avatar so quickly. There's hope for Middle Continent City. God Teacher Yu knew very well that only those who possessed the Dharma form and Dharma body were the true primordial spirit supremes. Only then would they have the means to wield great power. In the secret chamber deep into the Arch Palace, it was filled with dazzling golden light. Almost nothing could be seen clearly. Ji Tianxing was still sitting on the frost jade bed. All the pores on his body had opened up and released dazzling golden light. He was like a god, sacred and majestic. His aura was so powerful that it could shake the heavens and earth. In fact, after he had condensed his avatar, he could indeed control the heavens and earth. This was because he had cultivated the ultimate skill that the Mansion Master had imparted to him. What he cultivated was the heaven and earth Dharma body. More than a month had passed in the outside world. He had been in seclusion in the secret chamber for 14 months. Ever since he reached the second level of the Essence Soul realm, he had been cultivating his heaven and earth Dharma body for the past few months. Fortunately, he had cultivated diligently for a few months. With the support of the Mansion Master and the other three, he had successfully cultivated his avatar. Now that he had the Dharma form and heaven and earth Dharma body, he was a true primordial soul supreme. Furthermore, his strength had reached the third level of the Essence Soul realm. However, this was still not enough. He didn't stop cultivating. He continued to refine the Four's cultivation and continued to raise his strength. However, he had been in a state of cultivation all this time and was completely unaware of the changes in the outside world. He didn't notice that the Mansion Master, Emperor Yi, and the other three who had been imparting their cultivation to him, had already undergone tremendous changes. 80% of their lifetime's cultivation had been imparted to Ji Tianqing. They had become extremely old and weak. Their hair and beards were as white as snow. Their faces were old, and their skin was shriveled and wrinkled. They didn't look like the top experts of the continent at all. Instead, they looked like the elderly in the mortal world who had one foot in the grave and were about to reach the end of their lives. A month later, Xueqi and Emperor Yi had imparted their lifetime's cultivation to Ji Tianqing. The two of them slowly retracted their hands and sat on the frost jade bed weakly. They looked at each other and forced a smile. Our mission has been completed. Yes, we have no more regrets. Their voices were low and weak. After they finished speaking, they slowly closed their eyes. There was no longer any cultivation in their bodies. They had already become ordinary mortals. Without the support of magic, their bodies that had experienced thousands of years quickly collapsed and dissipated. With a soft rustling sound, their bodies quickly weathered and turned into specks of light that dissipated in the air. Eldest senior brother, little junior sister, we'll take our leave first. When their weak voices sounded, their bodies had completely dissipated and completely disappeared. There was an ancient saying that said, born from heaven and earth, return to heaven and earth. Born as Yang, destroyed as Yin, from beginning to end. After the two of them died, they turned into specks of light and returned to heaven and earth, blending into all things in the world. Perhaps, after a few years, they would reincarnate and be reborn again. But at that time, they would have long forgotten everything about their previous lives. It would be a new beginning. 2 months later, Xueqi had finished imparting her cultivation. She had turned into a white-haired mortal old woman. Her body had also become illusory and transparent. Like sand, she quickly weathered and turned into specks of light that dissipated. But her expression was very serene. Her eyes were fixed on Ji Tianqing as she murmured in a low voice. A teacher for a day, a teacher for life. If there is a next life, I am willing to serve you by your side. Eldest senior brother, I'll take my leave first. As her weak voice sounded, her body completely dissipated. She had finally returned to heaven and earth. In the secret chamber, only the Manor Lord and Ji Tianqing were left. They were still imparting their cultivation. Ji Tianqing's strength had reached the peak of the 3rd level of the primordial soul realm. He was about to break through to the 4th level. Unknowingly, 3 months had passed. Chapter 14:22. The Manor Lord slowly retracted his palms and ended the spell. The golden light that enveloped him gradually dissipated as well. He sat beside Ji Tianqing with a serene expression, his gaze fixed on Ji Tianqing. At this moment, his hair and beard were white, and his face was old and haggard. He was no different from an ordinary old man. However, his expression was calm and benevolent, and his gaze was filled with relief and relief. He was silent for a long time before his body gradually turned illusory. From the bottom to the top, he began to turn into specks of golden light that dissipated in the air. When his body disappeared, his head and white hair gradually dissipated as well. He sighed with melancholy. It's a pity that I won't be able to drink a mouthful of the vast sea wine that Master brewed personally. No one knew why he had uttered such a sigh before vanishing into thin air. He had lived for 1,000 years. So what had he experienced? From the beginning to the end, he was like a mystery that no one could understand. Xueqi, Yi Hengchuan, and Xiao Wentian did not understand, and Ji Tianqing was even more so. Regardless, the strongest person in the Tianxian continent, the Manor Lord Gu Daoxian, had dissipated and returned to heaven and earth. The lifetime cultivation of the Manor Lord, Emperor Yi, and the others had been refined by Ji Tianqing. He had successfully reached the 4th tier of the Essence Soul Realm, and his combat strength had been greatly enhanced once again. However, he did not end his cultivation and continued to study the Tao of Kenshin. Although the Manor Lord and the other 3 had imparted their lifetime's worth of cultivation and secret techniques to him, they had also mastered the Tao of Kenshin. He had condensed his Essence Soul, Dharma Idol, and Dharma Body. However, he had never forgotten that the Tao of Kenshin was the source of his martial arts. In the past, he was only at the Spirit Tempering Realm and cultivated the 1st and 2nd levels of the Tao of Sword Soul. Now that he had reached the Essence Soul Realm, it was time to cultivate the 3rd level of the Tao of Sword Soul. Swoosh! His Essence Soul entered the Kenshin tomb and appeared in the cold wilderness, standing near the 18 mysterious tombstones. The 9 tombstones on the left were still empty, but the 9 tombstones on the right had undergone subtle changes. The second tombstone was originally engraved with more than 100 mysterious and ancient characters. That was the second level of the Sword Soul Dao. Now, the seal script on the tombstone had disappeared. A few lines of ancient characters appeared on the third tombstone. Ji Tianqing walked in front of the tombstone and stared at the words on the tombstone at a close distance, carefully studying them. A few hours later, he was able to recognize all the characters and memorize them in his heart. Then, he looked at the second tombstone beside him and had a strange thought. Back then, when I was cultivating the second level of the Sword Soul Dao, I accidentally touched the first tombstone and was sucked in by it. I accidentally discovered an alternate dimension with a heavenly tome pavilion inside. Now that I've cultivated to the third level of the Sword Soul Dao, I wonder if the same thing will happen to the second tombstone? Thinking of this, he reached out his hand and touched the second tombstone. When his palm touched the black and cold tombstone, the tombstone lit up with a layer of faint golden light. Shwa! The mysterious golden light immediately enveloped him. He only felt his primordial spirit tremble and was sucked into the tombstone by the golden light. The next moment, his primordial spirit entered the tombstone and came to an alternate dimension. This was a mysterious and vast space. The sky was in all directions and under his feet was a white sea of clouds. In the thick white clouds in front of him, a white jade stone bridge was faintly discernible. The white jade stone bridge was very old and carved with exquisite patterns and patterns. He did not know what they meant. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing was shocked and a smile appeared on his face. As expected, this alternate dimension is very similar to the Heavenly Tome Pavilion. I wonder where the stone bridge is connected to? With a heart full of doubts, he stepped across the white jade stone bridge and walked into the depths of the sea of clouds. After a while, he saw the scene in front of him clearly. In the white sea of clouds, there were 99 steps of white jade stone stairs. At the end of the stairs stood a golden pagoda that was 100 meters tall. The pagoda was divided into 3 levels and was octagonal. The eaves that were like crescent moons spread out upward and were paved with glazed golden tiles. It looked very magnificent. The eaves of the octagonal eaves were carved with lifelike dragons and phoenixes that spread their wings and were about to fly. The door of the pagoda that faced the white jade stone bridge was tightly shut. The door that was 100 feet tall was wide and solemn. The black stone door revealed a sense of mystery and heaviness. There was an ancient aura that came from the vicissitudes of life. On both sides of the stone door stood 9 statues. Each statue was an awe-inspiring human guard, wearing silver armor and a golden cape, with a divine weapon hanging on his waist and an ancient halberd in his hand. Although the faces of these statues were covered by armor, they exuded a domineering and majestic aura. This scene was almost the same as the one in the Heavenly Tome Pavilion. Ji Tianqing became more and more expectant. His gaze fell on the lintel of the door. He saw that on the wide black lintel, 3 ancient golden seal characters were engraved. He observed for a moment before he recognized the 3 large characters. Divine Weapon Pavilion. I didn't expect that the second tombstone would hide an ancient divine weapon pavilion. The Heavenly Tome Pavilion collected tens of thousands of books and secret manuals. Could it be that this divine weapon pavilion collected all kinds of divine weapons and magic treasures? Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with anticipation. His eyes also became bright. He hurriedly crossed the sea of clouds and walked to the door of the divine weapon pavilion. He stretched out his hands and pressed on the heavy stone door. The 2 stone doors were carved with golden dragons and fire phoenixes. They were very lifelike and lifelike. There was neither a door knocker nor a mechanism to open the array on the door. However, Ji Tianqing had the experience of entering the Heavenly Tome Pavilion. He pressed his palms on the golden dragon and fire phoenixes. Suddenly, the 2 stone doors lit up with a dazzling golden light. The golden dragon and fire phoenixes also seemed to come alive. After a glance, they quickly drilled into the stone door and disappeared. When Ji Tianqing first entered the Heavenly Tome Pavilion, he was quite surprised to see this scene. Now he was used to it. Following a muffled creak 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 sound, the 2 stone doors slowly opened. A bright and dazzling golden light, as well as an ice-cold and dazzling cold light, immediately shone out from the crack of the door, enveloping Ji Tianqing's figure. He was full of anticipation. He stepped through the door and entered the main hall on the first floor of the pagoda. The spacious and bright main hall was at least 100 feet in radius. The surrounding walls were lit with gemstones and bright lights, emitting a dazzling brilliance. He walked to the middle of the main hall and stood still. He looked around and suddenly frowned. It was because the scene in the Divine Weapon Pavilion was not what he had expected. He originally thought that there would be many cabinets in the Divine Weapon Pavilion to display various divine weapons and magic treasures. However, the entire main hall was empty. There was no counter at all. On the ground of the main hall, there was a huge ancient array carved on it. Chapter 1423. Ji Tianqing's gaze was attracted by the ancient bronze cauldron. The design of the cauldron was very simple and clumsy. It was squarish and angular, appearing solemn and sacred. This ancient cauldron had 3 legs, 4 horns, and 8 ears. Countless patterns were carved on the cauldron, forming mysterious patterns one after another. Ji Tianqing walked around the cauldron and observed it closely. He only felt that this cauldron exuded an ancient aura. It faintly had a majestic and domineering aura that suppressed the heavens and earth. It also had an unfathomable sense of mystery. When he walked to the east side of the cauldron, he saw that there were 2 ancient black characters carved on the cauldron. The characters were vigorous and powerful, like the edge of a sword, revealing an incomparably fierce aura. 9 heavens. Ji Tianqing silently repeated these 2 words, secretly guessing. Could this ancient bronze cauldron's name be 9 heavens? Unfortunately, this was only his guess and could not be confirmed for the time being. He walked around the cauldron and returned to his original position, carefully observing the surroundings. The ground of the main hall was 100 feet wide, and it was an ancient and mysterious array. This giant bronze cauldron was right in the center of the array, and was the core of the array. Although the array had not been activated, the bronze cauldron was cold and lightless, without the slightest bit of temperature. But Ji Tianqing was very clear that the mysterious array beneath his feet was very profound and powerful. It was very likely to be a true god-level array. That ancient bronze cauldron must also be an extraordinary treasure. After a long while, he turned and walked towards the east side of the main hall. On the sturdy and thick wall, there were obviously many hidden compartments, used to store things. The mysterious array on the ground and that ancient cauldron seemed to be used for refining pills or refining weapons. This divine weapon pavilion should not be a place to store divine weapons and dharma treasures, but more like a workshop to forge divine weapons. This thought flashed across Ji Tianqing's mind, and he vaguely understood the purpose of the divine weapon pavilion. When he opened a few hidden compartments and saw the things stored in them, he was even more certain of this guess. Because the things stored in the hidden compartments were all rare and precious metals and ores, as well as all kinds of unknown strange materials. These things were obviously used to forge divine weapons and magic treasures. Ji Tianqing opened one secret compartment after another along the wall, checking the refining materials inside. Half an hour later, he finished counting. There were 360 secret compartments carved into the 4 walls of the main hall on the first floor, storing more than 300 kinds of refining materials. There were only a few materials that he had heard of and could possibly exist in the Tianxian land. Most of the materials were things that he had never seen or heard of before. He didn't even know the grades, origins, and uses of the materials. He saw that in the corner of the main hall, there was another staircase that led to the 2nd floor of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. However, when he stepped onto the golden jade stairs, he saw that there was a huge door at the end of the stairs. That was the door leading to the 2nd level. There were runes engraved on it. It was obvious that there was a powerful seal. He didn't even understand the grade of the array and the method of setting it up, so it was impossible for him to break it. Since he couldn't enter the 2nd floor, he could only move around on the 1st floor. His emotions had completely calmed down, and all the anticipation in his heart had dissipated. Originally, I thought that there were some powerful divine weapons stored here that could help me deal with the demon clan's elite warriors and the demon emperor. I didn't expect that there was a large amount of refining materials and a 9th heaven cauldron here. It was a place to forge weapons and magic treasures. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about those refining materials, and I don't know how to open the array and control the 9th heaven cauldron to refine weapons. To me, this divine weapon pavilion is temporarily not of any use. Ji Tianqing frowned and muttered a few words gloomily. At this time, a voice that he hadn't heard for a long time sounded in his mind. Who said that it's useless? Suddenly hearing this low and vigorous voice, Ji Tianqing's spirit was instantly shaken. He quickly asked, Burial of Heaven, you have finally awakened after sleeping for half a year? Burial of Heaven said with a calm tone, If there was enough time and the situation wasn't so tense, of course I would be willing to slowly recover. But time is running out. In this half a year, I can only do my best to absorb energy and recover as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Hearing you say this, there should be good news. How is your recovery now?" "About 40%. Burial of Heaven replied, and added, "You have contributed to this. If you hadn't constantly snatched soul crystals for me, I wouldn't have recovered so quickly." Ji Tianqing nodded with relief and said with a smile, "You've recovered about 40%. Even if the broken sword is still a half-step divine weapon, you are comparable to a primordial soul-level magic treasure. By the way, you said that this divine weapon pavilion can be used. What's going on?" Burial of Heaven said in a serious tone, "The divine weapon pavilion is the place where Kenshin forges divine weapons and refines magic treasures. And now I'm still a soul-level magic treasure, unable to break through to the primordial soul level. If I can recover to the primordial soul level, it will definitely be of great benefit to you and help you increase your battle prowess by several times. If you didn't open the divine weapon pavilion, you would have to search for materials all over the world and return to the sun-moon furnace to help me recover to the primordial soul level. Now it's convenient, all of this can be done in the divine weapon pavilion." After listening to Burial of Heaven's explanation, Ji Tianqing was immediately shocked and asked with joy, "Burial of Heaven, do you mean that you can forge a sword body in the divine weapon pavilion and recover to the primordial soul level? There is an ancient bronze cauldron here, and more than 300 kinds of materials. Unfortunately, I don't know how to open the formation, and can't distinguish the materials." Before he finished, Burial of Heaven said with certainty, "It's okay if you don't know, I can teach you how to open the formation and choose the materials. The Nine Heavens Cauldron is Kenshin's divine weapon, and this formation is also a real divine formation. With your strength, you can't understand it, let alone control it. However, you don't need to study this divine formation, you just need to know how to open it." After receiving its affirmative answer, Ji Tianqing was even more delighted and hurriedly nodded. "Since that's the case, then it's easy. We still have 4 months, and we'll try to help you recover to the primordial soul level as soon as possible." Burial of Heaven didn't waste any time and said calmly, "For months is enough, you can go and choose the materials first. I need 6 kinds of materials: glazed fire true gold, silver feather illusory spirit stone, 9 nether iron, sacred flame glazed stone." It told Ji Tianqing in detail about the appearance and characteristics of the 6 kinds of materials. Ji Tianqing opened the secret compartments in the wall one by one, looking for the 6 kinds of materials it needed. The grades of these 6 kinds of materials, among the more than 300 kinds of materials, were only below average, and weren't particularly rare. Ji Tianqing only used half an hour to find all 6 kinds of materials. Chapter 1424. Under the guidance of the Burial of Heaven, Ji Tianqing only used 4 hours to successfully activate the array. Of course, this divine array was incomparably profound. It was still not something he could comprehend and control. All he could do was activate this divine array. As for how the divine array operated, what mysteries it contained, what structure it was, and so on, it had nothing to do with him. After the divine array began to operate, the ground within a radius of 100 feet lit up with golden light. Seal characters and mysterious symbols that covered the sky and earth surged out. Endless ancient characters and symbols, like butterflies, flew up and surged toward the 9 Heavens Divine Cauldron like a tide. The huge 9 Heavens Divine Cauldron also released a sacred golden light. Many patterns and characters appeared on its surface. Inside the Divine Cauldron, the void divine fire was born. It turned into a black-purple cloud and started to spin inside the cauldron like a vortex. An invisible force filled the entire hall, causing Ji Tianqing to feel the pressure double. Sweat poured down his body like rain. "Tianqing, go and cultivate in peace. I will come out of seclusion in 3 months." The Burial of Heaven instructed before flying into the 9 Heavens Divine Cauldron and into the black-purple void divine fire. Ji Tianqing followed its instructions and put the 6 refining materials into the divine cauldron. Then he quickly left the hall. Swoosh! After leaving the divine weapon pavilion, he returned to Kenshin's tomb and appeared in front of the black tombstone. Next, what he needed to do was to comprehend the 3rd level of the Sword Soul Path, and continue to cultivate in seclusion to increase his strength. His primordial spirit returned to his body and began to comprehend cultivation techniques in peace. He worked hard to increase his strength. Previously, the mansion master had told him that the cultivation resources of the four of them were enough to support the operation of the secret room for 2 months. 2 months in the outside world was 20 months in the secret room. He still had 4 months. He had to use this time to increase his strength as much as possible. In Central State City, the situation was getting more and more tense. The scouts at the front lines would send back the latest news every day, reporting the movements of the demon army. 3 days ago, the demon army was 150,000 miles away from Central State. Along the way, they destroyed 3 cities and slaughtered hundreds of thousands of fleeing civilians and martial artists. 2 days ago, the demon army was 130,000 miles away from Central State. And now, the Devil Race's army was only 100,000 kilometers away from the Central Plains. The human army in Central Continent City could already clearly see that the northern skies were covered in a layer of black energy, as well as wisps of blood light flickering about. The Demon Race army came closer and closer. Central State City was in imminent danger. The number of the human army gradually increased to more than 13 million. Central Continent City's defensive fortifications were doubled, and the might of the formations was also raised to the peak. Countless soldiers and martial artists were ready to fight at any moment. Soon, another 5 days had passed. This time, there was no need for the scouts to report the news. The Imperial Emperor, the Imperial Tutor, and the human experts could clearly see the situation in the north. The 10 million demon army had already reached Central Continent City, stopping 10,000 li to the north. The mighty army of Devil Race soldiers was like a vast black tide, carrying with it a monstrous devil chi and blood chi. The Devil Race army stopped and set up camp on a plain 10,000 li away. While recuperating and organizing the army, they quickly built a devil army camp, constructing underground devil caves and tunnels. When dusk arrived, the sky to the north of Central State City was covered in black clouds, turning into a dark zone. Howling northern winds blew over, carrying with them strands of devil chi, as well as a strong smell of blood and killing intent. The human soldiers in Central State City all realized a problem. The territory north of Central State City had already completely fallen. The decisive battle that would decide the fate of humanity was about to arrive. However, the Devil Race army had traveled a long way, so they were not in a rush to attack. They set up camp outside Central State City, resting for an entire 3 days without launching an attack. However, tens of thousands of Devil Race scouts were always circling around Central State City, constantly monitoring the movements in the city. Both sides had set up their battle formations inside and outside Central State City. There were already no secrets to speak of, both sides clearly aware of the other side's military strength. Regardless of whether it was the human or Devil Race soldiers, they all understood a problem. If nothing unexpected happened, the human army would be defeated without a doubt. They would not be able to defend Central State City. As long as the continent's most sacred city fell, the human imperial court would quickly be destroyed. At that time, the end of the human race would arrive. When night fell, Central State City began to sparsely light up. Inside the dignified city lord's mansion, the discussion hall was brightly lit. More than 10 human experts were currently gathered in the hall, discussing important military matters with the Imperial Emperor. The Imperial Emperor sat at the head seat, the Imperial Tutor standing to the side. 6 people stood on the left side of the hall, the 4 Directions Divine General, Yun Zhongqi, and Long Yun Xiao. On the right side of the hall stood 7 soul refinement experts. These were all martial experts from the common people, recruited by the imperial court to resist the Devil Race army. Some of them were the leaders of powerful factions, some of them were the sect masters or old ancestors of peak sections. Some of them were wild cranes that roamed the continent, and some of them were hermits that had not appeared in the world for several hundred years. Even the continent's famous divine Dr. Bai Li was standing in this group. The human race had billions of martial artists and a very deep foundation. Naturally, countless experts were born. In times of peace, many experts kept a low profile and did not reveal themselves. Now that the human race was at a critical juncture of life and death, even hermits that did not care about the world would step forward bravely. The Imperial Emperor looked at everyone with a dignified gaze and said in a low voice, "Everyone here is an expert of my race, and also a commander that stood out from millions of martial artists. At this time of crisis, when our race is at a critical juncture of life and death, everyone here is shouldering the lives of 13 million soldiers and the hope of 10 billion humans. It was clear that the 12 soul refinement experts and Long Yunxiao in the hall were the commanders of the 13 million soldiers, each of them leading 1,000,000 soldiers. The Imperial Emperor paused for a moment, then continued, "As for everyone's duties, we will maintain the same. The 4 directions divine generals will guard the 4 city gates to prevent the devil race from attacking separately. The 1,000,000 soldiers led by the Son of Heaven will still be in charge of the 5 defensive formations. The other commanders will maintain a state of readiness at all times and will immediately support the other commanders if there is a situation. The Devil Race Army has already set up camp outside the city for 3 days. They should have recovered their strength by now. If this emperor is not wrong, tonight or tomorrow night, the Devil Race Army will launch an attack. After all, it is more advantageous for the Devil Race to attack at night." All the commanders nodded, agreeing with the Imperial Emperor's words. Only the Son of Heaven, Long Yunxiao, frowned and thought for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Imperial Emperor, now that Central State City has been fortified by us, its defenses are very strong. If the Devil Emperor and the Ancestor Devil God do not attack, we will be able to resist the 10 million strong Devil Race Army. Even defending for a year is not a problem. However, once the Devil Emperor and the Ancestor Devil God attack, none of us will be able to stop them." Chapter 14:25. Long Yunxiao's question was also what all the commanders were most worried about. If it was just a battle between 2 armies, the humans would naturally have the advantage as they were defending the city. With the powerful defenses of Central State City, the humans would naturally be in an undefeatable position. However, the demon's strongest trump card was the Demon Emperor, who possessed a heaven-defying divine artifact and the newly reborn ancestral demon god. If no one could stop the Demon Emperor and the demon god, the 2 of them could destroy the entire Central State City and annihilate the human army. All the commanders looked at the Emperor with shining eyes, their eyes filled with anticipation. They imagined that the Emperor had a countermeasure and trump card. However, the Emperor also frowned, his expression becoming more and more serious. No one knew if it was to stabilize the morale of the army or if it was true, but he said with a dignified expression, "This Emperor believes that this is a problem that all of you and my soldiers are worried about. Please do not worry. This Emperor has already made the corresponding arrangements and countermeasures. Everyone, just think about it, from the ancient times until now, how many hardships and difficulties have my race experienced? In the end, didn't we survive and become the most prosperous race on the continent? Please believe that no matter how dangerous and difficult it is, as long as we are united, we will definitely defeat the demons. The demons will never win against the righteous." The Emperor's tone was vigorous and filled with the power to inspire people. All the commanders were shaken, the flames of hope burning in their eyes. The Imperial Emperor gave a few more orders before asking the commanders to leave the hall. After everyone left, only the Emperor and the Imperial Tutor were left in the hall. The Emperor had a worried expression. He sighed silently and asked the Imperial Tutor beside him, "Imperial Tutor, is there any news from the Emperor's residence?" The Imperial Tutor stroked his beard and said calmly, "I just met the Great Divine Master today. The Great Divine Master told me 2 pieces of news, one good and one bad." Without waiting for him to finish, the Emperor frowned and said, "Let's talk about the bad news first." The Imperial Tutor said in a low voice, "Several days ago, the Palace Lord passed away." The Emperor immediately frowned, his face filled with shock. What? The Manor Lord was only injured by the Devil Emperor. How could he lose his life? The Imperial Tutor quickly explained. The Grand Master said that it was impossible for the Prefecture Master to sacrifice himself to help Ji Tianqing. Fulfill Ji Tianqing's wish? The Emperor raised his eyebrows and vaguely understood something. The second piece of good news is about Ji Tianqing? Yes. The Imperial Tutor nodded and said seriously, Ji Tianqing has broken through to the primordial soul realm not long ago. He has also condensed his primordial soul Dharma form and Dharmakaya. He has even caused a rare phenomenon of the heavens and earth. Hearing this, the Emperor's expression eased up a lot. He nodded slightly and said, if the Manor Lord's death was really to fulfill Ji Tianqing's wish, then Ji Tianqing should also inherit his orthodoxy. In this way, I can have another primordial soul stage elder to fight alongside me. However, Ji Tianqing has just reached the primordial soul realm. I'm afraid he can't kill the Devil Emperor, much less fight against the ancestral demon god. The Imperial Tutor also fell silent, not knowing how to answer. After all, he was also very worried. Soon it was midnight. The sky was as black as ink, without a single star. The biting cold northern wind howled, carrying the demonic chi and death chi of the demon race's main camp, blowing towards Central State City. 1,000 li outside the city, in a certain low-lying mountain range, a dozen dark red balls of bloody light were hiding. These bloody lights were all soul refinement stage blood gods. They were scattered in the mountain range of 1,000 li. They worked together to cast a spell, releasing all kinds of poisonous black chi, poisonous plagues, bloody chi, and soul-devouring cold winds. All kinds of calamities and tribulations turned into wisps of black chi and bloody chi, merging into the night and flying towards Central State City with the northern wind. There were even 2 blood gods who released poisonous black water into the mountain range, slowly spreading towards Central State City. This was Demon Commander Dark Knight's order. He wanted them to display their abilities before the battle began and do their best to create disasters for Central State City. Once the great battle began, they would use this chance to create even more terrifying disasters and slaughter as many humans as possible. The collected blood, energy, and souls would be fed to the ancestral demon god to devour, helping the ancestral demon god recover his magic power. In the gloomy night sky, there were still countless small black bugs flying about, silently throwing themselves at Central Continent City. These small black insects were only the size of a fingernail. They were completely black, but their defenses were powerful and they were extremely fast. These demonic insects were underworld bees, Demon Commander Dark Knight's trump card. Millions of underworld bees silently approached Central State City. They were about to pass through the depths of the earth and infiltrate the city to cause chaos. They possessed powerful attacks and poison, and their defenses and speed were extremely fast. They came and went without a trace. Each netherworld wasp could kill a Tongxian realm martial artist on its own. Besides this, Demon Commander Dark Knight had also laid down several plans. In the demon race's main camp, there were more than 1 million demon soldiers working together to activate a super great formation. This great formation had been set up by the Demon Emperor and many experts over the course of 3 days. After the great formation was activated, it would produce 3,000 li of demonic clouds that would cover the sky, protecting the entire demon race's main camp. Moreover, there would be over 100 blood gods' Dharma eyes in the great formation. They could monitor the movements of the demon race's main camp, and they could also attack and defend at the same time. In short, the demon race's main army had already finished their preparations for battle, accumulating power and waiting for action. About an hour later, the originally quiet and peaceful Central State City suddenly lit up with the dazzling light of a formation. A commotion appeared near the northern city wall, and noisy shouts sounded. Long Yunxiao, who was in charge of the great defensive formation, sensed the abnormalities on the northern city wall and hurriedly rushed over to check the situation. He had asked the general guarding the city and found out that a large number of demonic insects wanted to infiltrate Central State City from underground. There were also various kinds of demonic chi and poison that wanted to infiltrate the city during the night. Fortunately, the northern city's great defensive formation had always been activated. When those demonic insects and poisonous demonic chi touched the great formation, they suffered a backlash and suppression from the formation, causing a commotion. After Long Yunxiao learned of the situation, he personally checked the great formation. After confirming that there was no problem, he was relieved. He gave a few words of advice to the general guarding the city, then turned and left. At the same time, more than 10 Blood Gods clones sent the news of the plan's failure back to the demon race's main camp. In the depths of the demon race's main camp, there was a newly built black palace. It was the temporary residence of the Demon Emperor. He was sitting in the main hall with his eyes closed, holding the demon god's scepter in his hand. There was a black shadow floating at the top of the scepter. It was the great Jie Luo Brahma Soul Nightmare. Demon General Ming Yi reported the news of the plan's failure to the Demon Emperor truthfully. After the Demon Emperor heard it, he immediately frowned and sneered. He. Long Xuanquan, this bastard. He really made Central State City's defense very tight. Does he want to hide in the city like a turtle? In that case, Ming Yi, immediately lead the vanguard army to attack Central State City. Let this emperor see what kind of trash these defeated soldiers are. Chapter 14:26. After the Demon Emperor finished speaking, he threw the Demon God's scepter to Demon General Dark Knight. This ancient scepter was about 1.5 meters long, with 2 dark red blood dragons engraved on its handle. At the top of the scepter, An evil god with 3 heads and 6 arms was engraved with a domineering aura. This demon god scepter was a divine item of the demon race that had been passed down since the ancient times. It symbolized the majesty of the demon emperor. It was a primordial spirit-level magic treasure, and could be called a divine weapon in the Tianxian continent. However, ever since the demon emperor had obtained the extreme Een soul-splitting ruler, the demon god scepter's function had greatly diminished. Demon General Dark Knight held the demon god scepter respectfully. After bowing to the demon emperor, he quickly left the demon palace to gather the vanguard army. The incubus at the top of the demon god scepter twisted its body with excitement. It continuously transformed into various shadows and black fog, letting out waves of sinister laughter. Keek keek. Ever since I received the demon emperor's instruction, I have been cultivating in seclusion for an entire year. Finally, I have mastered that secret technique. However, I have not used it yet. Tonight, I can test its power on these human insects. The incubus bared its fangs and brandished its claws. It could not wait to slaughter the human soldiers. Demon General Dark Knight held the demon god scepter and carried out the demon emperor's order with an ice-cold expression. He did not pay attention to the incubus' words. After a short half-hour, he quickly gathered a 1,000,000 vanguard army. Like a black tide, they rushed out of the underground cave and rushed towards Central State City. Although the demon race army moved with the cover of the pitch-black night and monstrous demonic fog. However, when 1,000,000 demon race soldiers galloped over the mountains and plains, they could not help but let out loud rumbling noises that spread far and wide. 4 hours later, the demon race army rushed 4,000 miles to the north of Central State City. At this time, the scouts and sentries of Central State City all sensed the demon race's movements. The human soldiers near the North City Gate immediately blew a loud bugle horn and lit a dazzling beacon fire. In the human camp in the city, 1,000,000 soldiers slept with their clothes on. They were ready to get up at any time and join the battle. When the horn sounded throughout the northern city, the 1,000,000 soldiers under the divine general of the northern frontier immediately gathered and rushed to the northern city wall. The imperial tutor, the northern godly general, Xueqi, miracle Dr. Bailey, and a few other human masters all climbed up the northern city gate and looked at the land in the north. Everyone's expression was solemn, their killing intent surging as they waited for the arrival of the demon race's army. The imperial tutor held the horsetail whisk in his hand, his eyes twinkling as he said to the commanders around him, "Everyone, there's no need to worry. This is the vanguard of the demon army. According to my estimation, the devil race army is only 1,000,000 strong, and they are here to test the waters." The celestial emperor was right. 3 days have passed. The devil emperor must have been unable to suppress his killing intent, and immediately launched an attack. The commanders nodded, their expressions much more relaxed. Xueqi's lips curled into a cold smile, and he said hatefully, "By the time the demon army reaches the city, it will be dawn, and the people will be most relaxed. The devil emperor is as cunning as ever, not letting go of any details." The northern frontier godly general stared at the night sky with sharp eyes and said in a low voice, "This is the first and most important battle. The outcome will greatly affect the morale. We cannot lose." Miracle Dr. Bailey nodded and stroked his beard. "We cannot afford to lose this battle. Let's see who the commander is first." The imperial tutor smiled and waved his horsetail whisk. He said with certainty, "Who else can it be other than Demon Commander Dark Knight?" The few demon marshals under the demonic emperor had long been killed by Tianxing. Even the dozens of blood gods in the spirit refinement realm were killed by Tianxing. Only a dozen are left. Hearing these 2 sentences, Miracle Dr. Bailey and Xueqi revealed gratified smiles. They were quite proud. Very quickly, another 2 hours passed. The demon race army charged over in a grandiose manner and was about to reach the outskirts of Zhongzhou City. In the gloomy night sky, a dark red streak of light galloped over. Everyone looked up and saw 8 Devil Clan cultivators flying over together. The leader was a tall and sturdy demon race expert covered in black armor. It was Demon Commander Dark Knight. Of the 7 experts following behind it, only 2 were demon spirit controllers, while the other 5 were blood god sons. Demon Commander Dark Knight and the others stopped 100 kilometers outside the city. They stood in the night sky and sized up the situation at the top of the city. Before long, the 1,000,000-strong vanguard army charged outside the city. Hundreds of thousands of demon race soldiers formed a battle formation and joined forces to release powerful spells, launching an attack on Zhongzhou City. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dazzling dark red light condensed into saber, spear, sword shadows, and sky-splitting blades, bombarding the northern city gate like rain. All kinds of dark green, dark blue, and blood-colored demon fire also condensed into huge fireballs, pillars of fire, and demon phantoms, pouring down on the northern city gate. At the very front of the battle formation, the two spirit masters used secret techniques to summon more than 300,000 undead skeletons, which surged under the city gate like a white tide. The first battle of the decisive battle between the two armies thus began. The human army guarded the city tightly. Hundreds of thousands of people supported the operation of the formation, blocking the attacks of the demon race army. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers climbed up the city wall and lined up on the top of the wall. They formed a crossbow formation and shot a rain of arrows at the demon race army. There were also many soldiers controlling huge ballistae and catapults, fiercely bombarding the skeleton army outside the city. There were even martial experts and experts who released all kinds of ultimate secret techniques, pouring down raging flames, gales, and ice blades and frost swords that covered the sky and covered the earth into the demon race army's formation. The Imperial Tutor and the other commanders stood on the city wall. They were not in a hurry to make a move. They all stared at Demon Commander Dark Knight and the Blood Gods. When the Blood Gods saw that the battle had begun, they could not help but make a move. They released powerful strength and created all kinds of calamities. A Blood God released an earthquake tribulation, causing the surrounding thousands of kilometers to tremble violently. A super earthquake occurred, causing the entire Zhongzhou city to tremble violently. A Blood God released a flood tribulation, causing blood to gush out from the ground and fill the sky. It turned into a huge wave that was more than a dozen zhang tall, violently smashing into the Zhongzhou city. There was also a poisonous plague and poisonous black water that covered the sky, also surging towards Zhongzhou city. As long as the slightest flaw or crack appeared in the defensive formation of Zhongzhou city, those calamities would spread into the city, causing immeasurable losses. Seeing this scene, Yun Zhongqi and the other commanders all made a move, blocking the calamities created by the Blood Gods. The Imperial Tutor was still standing on top of the city gate, staring at Demon Commander Dark Knight with a sharp gaze. He could clearly see that Demon Commander Dark Knight was holding a black scepter in his hand. There was a black shadow swaying at the top of the scepter. He obviously knew that the scepter was the Demon God Scepter. The black shadow attached to the Demon God Scepter was the Nightmare. Chapter 14:27. Facts proved that the Imperial Tutor's guess was correct. The Blood God Scions and Vanguard Army under Demon Commander Dark Knight launched an attack without any regard for their own safety. Only it stood in the dark night sky, silently looking at the Demon God Scepter in its hand. No one knew what it communicated with the incubus through voice transmission. A moment later, when the two armies were fighting fiercely, shaking the heavens and the earth in chaos, its figure quietly disappeared. Whoosh! It quietly drilled into the dark ground and let go of the Demon God Scepter. Nightmare Lord, be careful. Bun Shui will cover you. It stared at the Demon God Scepter and warned in a cold tone. Ha ha ha. Just wait for my good news. The Nightmare Lord replied confidently. It immediately controlled the Demon God Scepter and drilled into the depths of the ground. The Demonic God Scepter was its body. It hid itself 100 li underground and sped towards Central Continent City. Demon Commander Dark Knight also turned and left, flying back into the dark night sky. It looked down at the battlefield below and saw the undead skeletons and the demon army surging towards Central State City like a tide. It waved its hand and used a secret technique, releasing 1,000,000 netherworld bees to launch an attack. Whoosh whoosh. More than 1,000,000 netherworld bees streaked across the night sky as fast as lightning. They surged out like a black tide, rushing towards the North City Gate. The North City Gate and several dozen li of city walls were protected by a huge 7-colored light barrier. This was a primordial spirit formation personally arranged by the Emperor. It had a powerful defensive power. Demon Commander Dark Knight did not expect the netherworld bees to break through the formation. It only put pressure on Central State City to cover the Nightmare Lord's plan. Of course, after releasing the netherworld bees, it also took out a pitch-black sword and bravely attacked Central State City Gate. Ghosts and gods avoid me. It shouted coldly and angrily. Holding the pitch-black sword with both hands, it slashed out a blood-red sword light that could split heaven and earth, slashing towards the majestic North City Gate. Pang! The 300 zhong long blood-red sword light slashed the defensive formation, exploding with a world-shaking sound. The seven-colored light shield of the array formation trembled and rippled as it was struck by the sword. Many of the human warriors who were supporting the operation of the grand formation paled in pain. You reptiles of the human race are actually cowering like turtles. Who dares to fight with me? Demon Commander Dark Knight stood majestically in the night sky with a sword in his hand and shouted with a cold voice. Its figure was tall and robust, and it wore black armor. Its entire body was suffused with dense devil chi, and it seemed to be extraordinarily domineering and valiant. Seeing this scene, the devil race army's morale was immediately boosted. Their battle cries shook the heavens, and they became even more ferocious. Hundreds of thousands of demon soldiers joined forces to attack, and the defensive formation was actually shaking. Light flashed, and it seemed as if it was about to break. The human soldiers who were supporting the defensive formation were under even greater pressure. Many of them were seriously injured, vomiting blood, or lying unconscious on the ground. When the Imperial Tutor saw this scene, he pointed at Demon General Dark Knight outside the city and ordered the several commanders beside him. You guys, join hands to deal with it. It's best if you can kill it. One of the commanders stared blankly for a moment and muttered in his heart. Demon General Dark Knight is the #1 general under the Demon Emperor. He has the strength of the 9th layer of the refined soul layer. We are not his match at all. The Imperial Tutor can fight him, but why don't you do it yourself? The Imperial Tutor saw his strange expression and explained. You guys keep a close eye on Demon General Dark Knight. This seat has more important things to do. One of the commanders casually asked, Your Majesty Imperial Tutor, what is it? Demon God Scepter. Nightmare. The Imperial Tutor dropped these words and quickly turned to leave. From the start of the war, the Imperial Tutor had been watching Demon General Dark Knight, and noticed the Demon God Scepter and Nightmare. Now that Demon General Dark Knight had taken the initiative to attack, the Demon God Scepter and Nightmare had disappeared. With the Imperial Tutor's shrewdness and wisdom, how could he not detect a plot? Whoosh! His figure streaked across the night sky like lightning, and immediately drilled into the dark underground, flying towards the depths of the earth. Damned Nightmare, there must be some plot, or he wants to sneak into the city from underground. Although there is an underground city and a powerful defensive array, that Demon God Scepter is a primordial spirit-grade magic treasure, and it is very likely to break the array. Demon General Dark Knight is leading the army to attack the northern gate, and Nightmare is very likely to sneak into the city from the other 3 directions. This kind of diversion tactic, do you think you can hide it from this seat? With this thought in mind, the Imperial Tutor promptly released the power of his soul, enveloping an area of 80 li, and carefully searched. At that time, when Central State City was arranging various defensive arrays, he was a participant and also a supervisor. He knew very well where the weak points of each great formation were. He first started from the defensive array in the eastern part of the city, and gradually searched the southern part of the city, and then the western part of the city. In a short half an hour, he searched through all of Central Continent City's underground. However, he did not find the Demon God Scepter, nor did he detect the aura of Nightmare. Strange, the aura of the Demon God Scepter is very obvious, so why can't this seat sense it? The Imperial Tutor temporarily stopped his search, full of doubts. At the same time, the great battle outside the northern gate had already reached its fiercest level. More than 300,000 undead skeletons had been blasted to pieces by the human soldiers, piling up into small mountains of white bones outside the city. At least 100,000 demon soldiers had died outside the city walls, their mutilated corpses scattered on the ground. Black and purple demon blood converged into small streams and flowed into the moat, causing the water of the moat to swell, completely turning it dark red. However, this was not enough to intimidate the demon army. On the contrary, it made them even more excited and frenzied, attacking fiercely with murderous intent. The defensive array protecting the northern wall was actually blasted open several times, with cracks and gaps appearing. Although, those cracks and gaps were quickly repaired. However, the blood mist, poison, and plague released by the blood god Scions took advantage of this opportunity to invade the city, causing a large number of deaths. In the night sky, Xueqi and several other commanders were besieging Demon Commander Dark Knight. Their strength was not as great as Demon Commander Dark Knight's, but they had the advantage in numbers, so they had the upper hand from the start. However, Demon Commander Dark Knight's 9 underworld armor had an incomparably strong defense, and only nascent soul magic treasures could break through it. As a result, It was in an almost undefeatable position against the human commanders. Just as the war was in full swing, and both sides were fiercely fighting, a hidden shadow suddenly flew out from a corner of the city wall. This was an ancient black scepter. It silently flew across the night sky and drilled into a human camp. This temporary camp was a manor with a radius of several thousand zhang, and there were more than 100,000 human soldiers stationed inside. When the black scepter flew into the manor, the mysterious shadow in the scepter immediately released invisible ripples of energy, spreading in all directions. The 120,000 soldiers in the manor were all dressed in armor, resting with swords and weapons as their pillows, ready to reinforce the front line at any time. Chapter 14:28. 120,000 human soldiers were silently affected by the Nightmare Lord's secret technique. Everyone fell into a dream and could not wake up at all. The demon god's scepter floated in the night sky, flickering with specks of red light, appearing very strange and mysterious. Within the scepter, the Nightmare Lord had already entered the dream domain created by the scepter and was wantonly slaughtering. The strange dreamland domain was like a boundless black space. In the black space, there were densely packed white balls of mist floating. There were more than 120,000 of them, forming a white sea. These white balls of mist were the dreams of the soldiers and were closely connected to their souls. The Nightmare Lord transformed into a dark purple giant demon that was 300 meters tall. Its appearance was hideous and terrifying, and it had a pair of demon wings. Its arms were thick and slender, and its 10 fingers were as sharp as knives. It waved its arms and formed a mysterious seal, releasing a powerful energy as it used a secret technique. Dream Soul Kill. With a low roar, an invisible mysterious force exploded, rolling up a violent shockwave, sweeping in all directions. Bam 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 bam. Wherever the mysterious energy swept, countless balls of mist would explode, creating a series of dull sounds. In just a few breaths' time, 120,000 balls of mist had all exploded, turning into a milky white air current that rolled like a wave. In the vast manor, 120,000 human warriors, who had been sleeping, were all killed without making a sound. They still maintained their resting postures, not moving at all, but their souls had already been destroyed, and their corpses were gradually becoming cold. On the surface, they did not seem to have any injuries, and not even a drop of blood could be seen. But just like that, they were silently slaughtered in a strange way. Ha 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 ha. The dream soul kill is actually so powerful. In the dream, I am an invincible god. The Nightmare Lord laughed excitedly, crazily devouring the wave-like white air current, refining it into its own power. That was the dream of 120,000 soldiers, and also the power of their souls. The Nightmare Lord quickly devoured the white air current, and its power was greatly increased. It left the dream domain in satisfaction and returned to the demon god's scepter. In the night, the manor was still silent, and covered in a layer of cold death aura. But no one noticed this change, and no one knew what was going on. Shwa! The demon god's scepter streaked across the night sky, quietly leaving the manor and flying to the next military camp. A moment later, the demonic god's scepter flew into an ancient and dignified palace. This palace covered an area of 3,000 feet in radius. There were a few courtyards around it, and there were many secret rooms underground. About 80,000 human soldiers were stationed in this palace. They were warriors under the command of a human commander. They were resting in the military camp, waiting for orders, and could support the battle on the 4 city gates at any time. The palace was heavily guarded both inside and outside. There were hundreds of guards patrolling the area, as well as dozens of open and hidden sentries. However, to the King of Nightmares, all of this was useless. The demonic god's scepter concealed its aura and sneaked into the palace. The King of Nightmares began to use his secret technique again, releasing a mysterious, formless energy that enveloped a radius of 10,000 feet. Next, the same scene played out. After being affected by the mysterious power, more than 80,000 human soldiers fell into a deep dream and fell unconscious on the ground. Regardless of whether it was True Energy Realm or Tongxian Realm ordinary soldiers, or Origin Core Realm or Heavenly Origin Realm generals, none of them were able to withstand the Nightmare's secret art. Within the dream domain, the King of Nightmares began its massacre. It laughed savagely as it detonated more than 80,000 balls of white mist. After killing all the soldiers, it devoured their souls and dream domain energy. In a short span of 100 breaths, The entire palace fell into a deathly silence. Just like that, over 80,000 human warriors died in a strange way. The demonic god's scepter silently left the palace and flew through the night sky. The King of Nightmares looked around with greedy eyes, searching for the next hunting ground. The imperial tutor gripped his horsetail whisk and flew through the night sky with a gloomy expression, frowning as he pondered. That damned King of Nightmares, just where is it hiding? Since it has appeared, it must have taken action. It definitely won't let this matter rest. Perhaps it's hiding near the northern city gate, waiting for the demon army to break through the defensive array so that it can charge into the city? This thought flashed through the imperial tutor's mind as he sped back to the northern city gate. Previously, he had searched the eastern, western, and southern city gates, but he had not searched near the northern city gate. He had a faint premonition that the King of Nightmares was hiding near the northern city gate. Whoosh! He cut through the night sky as fast as lightning, flying over an ancient manor. This place was only 20 kilometers away from the northern city gate. The imperial tutor's spiritual energy inadvertently swept across the manor. He immediately sensed that something was amiss and hurriedly stopped. He knew very well that the manor was an army camp, and there were more than 100,000 human soldiers stationed there. At this moment, although the manor was brightly lit, there was not a single person in sight. Furthermore, after he used his spiritual energy to investigate, he discovered that the 100,000 soldiers in the manor had all lost their vitality and turned into ice-cold corpses. This result caused his body to shake violently, and his expression changed on the spot. How could this be? More than 100,000 soldiers, without a single injury, died without a sound? The imperial tutor's expression darkened. He hurriedly landed in the manor and carefully inspected the injuries of the soldiers. A moment later, he found the result. They actually died in their sleep, and their souls were directly obliterated. This is the King of Nightmares method. The damned King of Nightmares. It has already snuck into the city and begun to assassinate our soldiers. The imperial tutor murmured in a cold voice. He was so angry that his white beard trembled. He hurriedly left the manor and flew into the dark night sky. His left hand formed a seal, and his right hand waved the horsetail whisk, beginning to cast a secret technique. Open the third eye. His left hand formed a seal, and a dazzling golden light flashed. He wiped his eyes, and his pupils instantly turned golden. In the blink of an eye, his eyes turned into the legendary secret technique, Third Eye. It had the ability to see through illusions, fog and camouflage, and could see things that ordinary experts could not. He stood high in the sky, and his golden third eye overlooked the northern city district. Soon, he discovered all kinds of strange phenomena. At least 5 army camps and 600,000 human soldiers had been brutally murdered by the King of Nightmares. The 5 army camps seemed peaceful on the surface, but they were actually places of death, filled with an invisible aura of death. The souls of the soldiers stationed in the camps had long been obliterated, and they had turned into ice-cold corpses. When the imperial tutor's third eye swept across an army camp 20 kilometers away, he immediately saw a black shadow casting a spell on 100,000 soldiers. I've finally found you. Damned King of Nightmares, let's see where you can escape to this time. The imperial tutor's voice was cold and angry. He waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and rushed over like a flash of light. Chapter 1429. Swoosh. In the blink of an eye, the imperial tutor had teleported 10 miles away and arrived above the military camp. The dark and cold demonic god scepter was floating in the military camp, releasing invisible demonic power. The incubus entered the dream realm and transformed into a 1,000-feet-tall demon. It looked at the dense white fog and laughed proudly. It liked to control the dream realm and rampage in other people's dreams, slaughtering wantonly. Especially after it had been in seclusion for a year and mastered the dream soul kill. It wanted to kill and enjoy the pleasure of being a god in the dream realm. However, just as it was about to use the secret technique to kill the 100,000 soldiers, a dazzling golden light descended from the sky and struck the demonic god scepter. Bam! With a dull explosion, the demonic god scepter was sent flying and smashed into a palace not far away. Kaboom! A huge hole was blasted in the majestic palace. Half of the wall collapsed, and countless bricks and rubble splattered everywhere. Although the demonic god scepter was an immortal soul-level magic treasure with extremely strong defense, it was not damaged. However, the incubus's plan was thwarted. The dream realm shook violently, and the secret technique it was about to use was interrupted. Swoosh! The dream realm dissipated and it returned to the top of the demonic god's scepter. It turned into a black shadow and looked at the night sky outside the ruins. The imperial tutor quickly waved the horsetail whisk in his hand, and instantly, 6 golden lights shot towards the demonic god's scepter. Incubus! You damned demon! Your death is not to be regretted. The imperial tutor roared angrily. His body emitted a dazzling golden light and released a powerful aura. Bam! 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 The incubus could not dodge in time and was hit by the 6 golden lights. A series of dull sounds rang out. The demonic god's scepter was sent flying again and smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater in the ground. The ground in a radius of 10,000 feet shook violently. Such a shocking commotion did not wake up the 100,000 soldiers in the military camp. Everyone was still in a state of deep sleep and could not wake up from the dream. Seeing this, the imperial tutor used the soul-shaking roar and roared. Roar! The sound waves, which contained powerful soul power undulations, engulfed the entire military camp and covered the 100,000 soldiers. Immediately, everyone's faces turned pale from the shock, and they were immediately freed from the dreamland. Many of them had a splitting headache. They hugged their heads and groaned in pain. Some of the weaker soldiers even had blood flowing out of their noses and mouths. The imperial tutor's method of forcefully awakening the soldiers was too simple and crude. It caused some damage to their bodies and souls. But in such a critical situation, this was the only way he could solve the problem effectively. The demonic god's scepter flew out of the deep pit and floated in the night sky. The king of nightmares roared angrily. Imperial tutor, you despicable old thing, how dare you ruin my plans? I'm going to kill you. As he roared, the demonic god's scepter shot out several streaks of dark red light towards the imperial tutor. Swish! Swish! The 4 streaks of blood-red light were all 30 meters long. They erupted with extremely violent power and engulfed the imperial tutor's figure. The imperial preceptor waved his horsetail whisk, and golden light danced in the air, forming a golden wall in front of him. Bang! 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 The 4 streaks of blood-red light hit the golden wall, producing a series of muffled sounds that echoed in the night sky. The golden wall and the blood-red light streaks collapsed at the same time, exploding into fragments that flew in all directions. The imperial tutor was also sent flying 100 meters away. He crashed into a house and shattered the entire house. The terrifying shockwave swept across a radius of a few hundred meters and sent thousands of soldiers flying. The soldiers came to their senses and realized that a strong enemy had invaded. They hurriedly shouted and roared, seeking help. At the same time, some of the stronger experts joined forces to attack the demonic god's scepter. The demonic god's scepter ignored everyone's attacks and released blood-red ripples that spread in all directions. Immediately, several hundred elite experts were sent flying. Those Yuan Dan experts all had blood spurting out from their orifices or their bodies exploded. More than half of them died on the spot. The imperial tutor arrived just in time and used his technique to block the blood-red ripples. His left hand formed a seal and his right hand waved his horsetail whisk. He stood majestically in the night sky and used his secret technique to attack the Nightmare Lord. However, the Nightmare Lord used the demonic god's scepter as its body and could block almost all secret technique attacks. It blocked the imperial tutor's secret technique and released a monstrous demonic chi and black light. It began a massacre in the army camp, wantonly slaughtering 100,000 soldiers. A huge rumbling sound exploded in the night sky and spread across half of Central State City. Various blood-red and purple lights also flashed in the night sky, attracting everyone's attention. The entire army camp was in chaos. In just 20 seconds, more than 40,000 soldiers had lost their lives. The remaining tens of thousands of soldiers were forced to retreat in panic and flee in all directions. The Nightmare Lord still wanted to pursue and kill even more soldiers to create chaos in the city. The Imperial Preceptor dashed forward to stop it without any regard for his own safety. He used all kinds of skills and secret techniques to fight with the Nightmare Lord. The two fought for a while, and the shock waves from their battle destroyed everything in a radius of 10 miles. Unfortunately, the Imperial Tutor could not do anything to the Nightmare Lord. Instead, his soul was injured by the Nightmare Lord's secret technique and his strength was greatly weakened. 100 seconds later, More than a dozen Heaven Origin Realm generals and a few Soul Refinement Realm generals came from all directions to provide reinforcements. Everyone worked together to attack the Nightmare Lord and immediately tied it down, preventing it from causing trouble in the city. Seeing that the situation was bad, the Nightmare Lord stopped fighting and turned to flee into the distance. It was very clear that these people could not do anything to it and would not be able to cause any harm to it. However, its whereabouts had been exposed, so it could not stay here for long. The human Sovereign Emperor was overseeing the city. If it delayed too long and provoked the Sovereign Emperor, it would be in danger. Whoosh! The Nightmare Lord controlled the demon god's scepter and streaked across the night sky like a streak of light. In the blink of an eye, it had shaken off everyone and burrowed into the depths of the ground. The generals and many Heaven Origin Realm experts did not give up and burrowed into the ground, swearing to capture the Nightmare Lord and the demon god's scepter. However, the demon god's scepter was an Origin Soul Realm magic treasure after all. It was just too fast. In just a few seconds, the demon god's scepter had burrowed 100 miles into the ground and quickly escaped from the vicinity of Central State City. The generals chased to the edge of Central State City, but when they sensed the demon god's scepter's aura leaving, they could only retreat helplessly. After this ordeal, Central State City was in quite a bit of chaos. More than 600,000 soldiers had been slaughtered by the Nightmare Lord, which infuriated the generals. They wanted nothing more than to kill the Nightmare Lord 10 times over. The Imperial Tutor remained calm and ordered the generals to tighten their defenses. Then, he rushed to the North Gate and threw himself into the battle. Near the North Gate, the battle between the two armies had already reached its peak. Chapter 1430. In order to put pressure on the human defenders and cooperate with the Nightmare's assassination, Demon Commander Dark Knight and the army of the Devil race attacked continuously for 2 hours. The defensive array covering the northern gate was broken through 8 times in succession, each time creating cracks and holes. However, the cracks and holes in the defensive array were quickly repaired. Apart from the Nightmare and the demonic fog and poisonous gas, the demon army could not enter Central Continent City through the cracks. Now the Nightmare's actions had been exposed and the plan had failed, escaping from Central Continent City. Demon Commander Dark Knight did not waste any more time in the lives of the demon soldiers, decisively stopping the attack. In a short 100 breaths of time, more than 100,000 undead skeletons and more than 600,000 demon soldiers retreated like a tide, quickly leaving Central Continent City. The shouts and sounds of fighting near the northern gate gradually weakened and dissipated. The morning sun was about to rise and a new day was about to arrive. The first battle between the two armies had also ended. Although this battle was only a probing attack by the demons. But the battle was extremely bitter and the result was also shocking. Outside the northern gate, the moat was covered in countless bones and demon corpses, the river water also turning dark red. On the wasteland, there were piles of white bones and demon corpses all over the ground. At least 400,000 undead skeletons and more than 300,000 demon soldiers were killed in this battle. The human defenders also suffered several tens of thousands of deaths and 100,000 injuries. 5 barracks in Central Continent City were destroyed and more than 600,000 human soldiers were massacred by the Nightmare. In comparison, the human losses were even more disastrous. After the battle ended, the soldiers immediately busied themselves, cleaning up the battlefield, reinforcing the defensive array, and rebuilding the barracks. The Imperial Tutor and several commanders hurried to the City Lord's mansion to report the situation to the Emperor. After the Emperor learned of the situation, he thought for a while and then issued several orders to strengthen the defenses of Central Continent City. In particular, those defensive arrays needed to be strengthened to prevent the Nightmare from sneaking into the city and causing trouble again. In the Emperor's mansion, the Imperial Palace was still quiet. In the dimly lit secret room, Ji Tianqing was still sitting cross-legged on the frigid ice jade bed, completely focused on cultivating. In another 7 days, the 2-month deadline would be up. At that time, the ancient divine formation in the secret chamber would shut down and lose the effect of time acceleration. Now, Ji Tianqing had already cultivated the 3rd level of the Sword Soul Dao. His martial Dao foundation was even more solid, and his strength had also increased by 2 times. He was still meditating on a lost art, the 5th sword of the Burial of Heaven, the 7-star sword. Before Burial of Heaven entered the 9th heaven cauldron, he taught him the 5th sword technique. The power of this sword technique was too strong, and the cultivation requirements were also very high. Only when he reached the Essence Soul realm would he have a chance of successfully cultivating it. Big Dipper Sword. One sword to shatter 7 stars. If Ji Tianqing was strong enough, the 4th sword would be able to cut open the sky and see the starry sky. The 5th sword's strike could shatter 7 stars with a single strike. The stars were unreachable. Although they looked small, they were actually another vast and magnificent world. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the might of this Big Dipper sword had attained. It was no exaggeration to say that this was a true god-tier sword art. Only those in the martial god realm could unleash the true power of the sword technique. Ji Tianqing paid no attention to the matters of the outside world. He only cultivated with all his might and did his best to increase his strength. The day he mastered this divine art would be the day he returned to the mountain and took revenge. A day passed quickly. After a day of rest, Central State City temporarily calmed down. Several defensive formations had also been strengthened by the emperors and commanders, and the defenses were even tighter. In the middle of the night, muffled rumbling came from the north of Central State City. This was the sound of thousands of soldiers and horses trampling over the earth. It spread far and wide in the silent night. The human soldiers sensed that something was wrong. Realizing that the demon army was about to launch another attack, they immediately blew the horn to defend. The million soldiers guarding the north of the city were immediately on high alert. The defensive formations were pushed to their limits, forming a dazzling 7-colored barrier that illuminated half of the city. More than 100,000 elite soldiers climbed up the city walls. They lined up in a row with bows and crossbows, and set up all kinds of defensive equipment. The imperial tutor and various commanders hurried to the north gate, personally assuming command. However, 2 hours later, the 3 million-strong demon army had arrived outside Central State City, but they were divided into 2 groups. The first group was led by Demon Commander Dark Knight, attacking the north gate with all their strength. The other group was led by Nightmare, attacking the east gate with all their strength. Seeing this scene, the imperial tutor promptly made the corresponding arrangements. He sent several commanders to assist the Northern Frontier Divine General and Eastern Woods Divine General Xiao Han. Not long after, the great battle began. The war cries and roars of the million soldiers converged into a deafening sound wave that resounded in the sky above Central State City. The 2 demon army launched an attack without any regard for anything. This attack was very fierce, and definitely not probing. The demon army seemed to have made up their mind to break through the defenses of Central State City. In front of the demon army were hundreds of thousands of undead skeletons and evil demons, attacking without any regard for their lives. The hundreds of thousands of demon army soldiers formed a battle formation. Using the combined battle formation, they released attacks comparable to primordial spirit powerhouses, constantly bombarding Central State City's defensive formations. The demon army even used more than 2,000 fierce demon beasts. These demon beasts were of different species and had different appearances, but they were all as large as mountains, possessing immense strength and terrifying destructive power. They angrily roared and released powerful killing moves, fiercely attacking the 2 city gates. The human army was under great pressure. Soon, the few defensive magic formations were broken. Cracks and holes appeared on the defensive magic formations. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the blood god children who had been waiting for a long time hurriedly released poison, plagues, blood water, demon chi, and other powers, pouring them into Central State City. They also created super earthquakes and floods, and even urged the surging magma of the Earth's core to pour into Central State City. Outside the North Gate and East Gate, the scene of the great battle was extremely intense, the scene incredibly chaotic. Large numbers of casualties quickly appeared among the human soldiers. There were constantly people who died or were heavily injured and lost the ability to fight. The human army garrisoned in the city continuously reinforced the 2 battlefields, filling in the gaps in their numbers. The great battle continued for an entire 2 hours. The demon army's attacks were still fierce, without any intention of retreating. The imperial tutor and the commanders all realized that the demon army's attack tonight was probably not that simple. They definitely had some sort of scheme or backup plan. Just as everyone gathered together and discussed this matter with grave expressions, a monstrous bloody light flew over from the northern night sky. Muffled rumbling noises could be heard coming from the mountains and wastelands in the distance. Chapter 1431. In the blink of an eye, that huge dark red light flew to the northern city gate. The bloodlight stopped 10 miles away from the city and quickly condensed into a tall and burly figure. This person was more than 10 feet tall and had 2 heads. He wore a purple robe and was covered in black dragon scales. He exuded a powerful and domineering aura. He was the ancient demon emperor. Behind him stood a few blood god sons in the soul refinement realm. Demon General Dark Knight hurried to welcome the demon emperor. After bowing respectfully, he followed the demon emperor's instructions and ordered the demon army to stop attacking. 15 minutes later, the demon army left behind more than 200,000 corpses and retreated hundreds of miles away to rest in the wilderness. The imperial tutor and the commander's expressions changed when they saw the ancient demon emperor arrive. Their eyes were very serious. The imperial guards guarding the city gate hurriedly rushed to the city lord's residence to report the news to the emperor. As time passed, the rumbling sounds got closer and closer. The imperial preceptor and the various commanders looked to the north and very quickly saw that under the curtain of night, there were several demon armies galloping towards them as fast as the wind. Looking around, there were demon army soldiers in all directions. It was as boundless as a black sea. The imperial preceptor roughly estimated that there were at least 5 million demon soldiers in the army that the devil emperor brought with him. The demon army had occupied the area of 1,000 miles outside Zhongzhou City. When the devil army reached 100 li away from the city, they stopped one after another and got into an offensive formation. The biting cold north wind blew over, bringing with it a boundless chill of death. The arrival of millions of demon army caused demon chi to fill the sky outside Zhongzhou City. The area of a few thousand miles was covered by black clouds. An invisible suppressive force coiled around the hearts of the human soldiers, causing them to feel immense pressure. Their hearts felt heavy. The imperial tutor, Yun Zhongqi, and the others looked at the demon emperor and demon general Dark Knight outside the city. They murmured with grave expressions. Is the final battle about to begin? The demon emperor has always been sinister and cunning. The demon race's attacks are extremely fast. The demon emperor is leading an army to attack. I'm afraid it's going to be a battle to the death tonight. Soon, a golden light lit up in the sky above Zhongzhou City and flew over as fast as lightning. Shwa! After a few breaths, the golden light landed on the wall of the northern city gate and stood in front of the imperial tutor and the commanders. The person who had come was the imperial emperor. He was dressed in golden dragon-patterned armor and a dark golden cloak. The human sovereign's sword hung at his waist, making him look sacred and dignified. Judging from the emperor's attire, it was obvious that he was going to personally lead the army and participate in the battle. Clearly, he also thought that the demon emperor was personally leading the attack to start a decisive battle. The demon emperor stood proudly on the city wall and stared at the demon emperor with burning eyes. Ever since the demon emperor arrived outside the city, he had been waiting silently. At this moment, as the emperor showed up, he said in a deep and cold voice, Long Xuanquan, from the moment the Heaven Dragon Mountain Pass was broken, the human race was doomed. Now that things have reached this point, you can only hole up in Central State City, yet you still want to stubbornly resist. You are truly stubborn. You know very well that not only the human race, the Water Clan and the Demon Clan are also destined to be defeated. In the end, this profound sky continent will belong to the Demon Clan. Meaningless resistance will only lead to more sacrifices. More innocent human beings will die miserably because of your stubborn resistance. The Demon Emperor's voice contained soul-suppressing power. Like rolling thunder, it resounded in the night sky and spread across the entire Central State City. The invisible soul-suppressing power quietly bewitched the rationality of the human warriors and civilians, stirring up their emotions. The Imperial Emperor immediately saw through the Demon Emperor's scheme and revealed a disdainful sneer. Demon Emperor, you are a great demon who has lived for thousands of years, the Emperor of the Demon Clan of the Northern Desert. You have always been treacherous and cunning. I didn't expect that you would use such low-level instigation tricks. How laughable! The Imperial Emperor shouted coldly with disdain. His majestic voice spread across the entire Central State City. His voice also contained invisible soul-suppressing power that could calm the minds of the warriors and civilians, keeping them calm and rational. The Imperial Emperor pressed the hilt of the human sovereign's sword with his left hand, and pointed at the human warriors on the city wall with his right hand. He said with a vigorous voice, Demon Emperor, no matter how you try to bewitch people, you will never be able to shake the will of our warriors and civilians. We humans have a blood feud with the Demon Clan. We are like fire and water, and we will fight to the death. No matter what you say, We human warriors will unite and fight to the death. We will shed our last drop of blood to kill the demon clan." As the Imperial Emperor's voice faded away, the million warriors in the northern city area all let out a vigorous roar that shook the heavens. "Fight the demon clan to the death!" The million warriors shouted at the same time. Their imposing manner was magnificent and stirring. The horrifying sound waves shook the sky and spread for thousands of miles, shaking the earth. The demon emperor revealed a vicious sneer and said with a mocking tone, "Long Xuanquan, since you human warriors are so united and want to fight to the end, I will give you a great gift. At the same time, I also want to see if you are a virtuous and wise human imperial emperor, or a hypocritical and heartless hypocrite." As his voice faded away, the demon emperor waved his right hand and shot out a blood-red light that covered the sky. The blood-red light was like a flood that poured down from the night sky onto the ground and immediately spread out. After the blood-red light landed on the ground, it quickly dissipated, and one figure after another appeared. There were countless humans, men and women, old and young. Most of them were old and weak. Judging from their attire, they were obviously the people of the Central Plains. Almost all of them were covered in wounds and blood, and their spirits were weak and frightened. They huddled together in fear, crying and moaning in pain from time to time. As the blood-red light continued to pour down, more and more humans appeared on the ground. They huddled together like ants, forming a dark mass. After 100 breaths of time, the demon emperor retracted his right arm, and the blood-red light stopped pouring down. On the blood-soaked ground, hundreds of thousands of pitiful and weak humans appeared. They huddled together in a chaotic mess, and their cries were heart-wrenching. Obviously, the demon emperor had used the secret technique of the heaven and earth sleeve to store the hundreds of thousands of humans in his sleeve. Outside the Central Plains city, in front of the two armies, he released these humans at the critical moment. There were more than 300,000 humans piled up on the barren land. At first, they were filled with fear. Seeing the demon clan army around them, they knew that they could not escape or live, and they all cried in despair. After a while, some people saw the Central Plains city not far away, and they all cried out in joy and excitement. Instantly, countless humans were awakened and looked up at the north gate. Chapter 1432. The Emperor and the Imperial tutors' faces darkened when they saw the Demon King release hundreds of thousands of civilians. They didn't need to guess to know that this was the Demon King's great gift. Without a doubt, this was not a great gift. This was a cruel and ruthless scheme. Sure enough, the Demon Emperor looked down at the hundreds of thousands of human beings under his feet, curled his lips into a mocking sneer, and said loudly, "Worms, do you see this? That is Zhongzhou City. Those standing on the city wall are your imperial tutor and the emperor, as well as the soldiers who protect the human race." The 300,000 civilians all looked up at the north gate and the soldiers on the city wall. Everyone's heart was filled with a strong desire to survive. However, they were surrounded by the demon army and could not escape. They would be killed if they tried anything funny. Their only hope of survival was in the hands of the soldiers who were guarding the city. The Demon King sneered and said to the civilians in a bewitching voice, "Do you want to live? If you want to live, beg your emperor to send an army to save you." As his voice fell, the citizens were instantly energized, shouting and crying for help at the top of their lungs. "Your Majesty, save us. We don't want to die. Please save us. Your Majesty, kill the Demon King and kill all these demons." The cries of the hundreds of thousands of civilians gathered into a deafening sound wave that crashed into Zhongzhou City. The human soldiers near the North City Gate all looked anxious and worried. Their expressions became complicated. Seeing their human compatriots covered in wounds, pain and helplessness, everyone couldn't bear to see them suffer in such a miserable and hopeless manner. Almost every normal person would feel pity for them and want to step forward to save the people from the hands of the demon race. However, the soldiers suppressed these thoughts in their hearts. They remembered the military order and would not make a fuss. They would not act on their own. The Demon Emperor looked at the Demon Emperor with a cold smile and said in a mocking tone, "Long Xuanquan, these insects are your people. They are all waiting for you to save their lives. As an imperial emperor of the human race, you once swore to the world and your ancestors that you would use your life to protect the people and territories of the human race. If you don't want to see these worms being massacred by this emperor, then hurry up and send an army to rescue them. Of course, I have long seen that you are a heartless, hypocritical, and despicable tyrant. You would definitely leave him in the lurch, right? Ha ha ha. With that, the demon emperor placed his hands behind his back and laughed maniacally. The millions of demon soldiers in the wilderness also let out ear-piercing jeers. When the emperor, the imperial tutor, and the other commanders saw this scene, their faces became more and more unsightly. Flames of anger flickered in their eyes. The soldiers guarding the city were also furious. They stared at the demon emperor with murderous eyes. Above and below the city walls, countless soldiers were cursing angrily and discussing among themselves. In front of almost 10 million people, the devilish emperor cursed the emperor as a heartless, hypocritical, and despicable tyrant. The human soldiers naturally didn't believe this nonsense. No matter how the devilish emperor slandered the emperor, he couldn't destroy the emperor's image in their hearts. However, more than 300,000 people were suffering outside the city. Could the emperor watch as the commoners were killed without doing anything? To save them or not to save them, this was a problem that gave him a headache. The emperor, the imperial tutor, and the human commanders all knew that these 300,000 people had been abducted by the demon army after they killed their way into Central Plains. The demon emperor had deliberately used these people as hostages to put on a good show outside Central Plains. He wanted to attack the hearts of the human soldiers. The people were innocent and helpless, miserable and in pain. They could die at any moment under the demon's blade. The emperor and the commanders couldn't bear to see this and wanted to save the people. However, they knew that this was the demon emperor's scheme. If the emperor sent out an army to fight the demons and save the people, the human army would definitely be surrounded by countless human soldiers. The human soldiers who went out of the city to fight were bound to be besieged by millions of demons. In the end, they would be completely annihilated and would not be able to save the civilians. If the emperor insisted on not sending reinforcements, everyone could only watch as the 300,000 people were slaughtered by the demons. This would undoubtedly prove that the emperor was a heartless hypocrite. It would deal a heavy blow to the morale of the human soldiers. In short, whether he saved the people or not, the emperor was in a bad position. The imperial tutor and the commanders angrily cursed the demon emperor for being despicable and shameless. They also tried to persuade the people outside the city, explaining the pros and cons of the situation to them. Everyone, don't listen to the demon emperor. He is the cruelest and most cold-blooded demon. This is the demon race's scheme. They want to break our morale and force us to fight outside the city. My people, please believe in the imperial court, and please believe in the soldiers of my race. We will always exist to protect the people of the human race. But tonight, we might have to disappoint everyone. Please understand. In order to protect Central State City, and to protect the millions of people in the world, we cannot open the city to fight. The 300,000 people were originally filled with hope for survival, fantasizing about a miracle. They shouted loudly and begged humbly. However, after hearing the words of the imperial tutor and the commanders, the people felt as if a basin of cold water had been poured over their heads. Their bodies immediately turned cold, and they looked as if they had lost their souls. Countless people were in despair. They cried bitterly, kneeling on the ground and begging. Some people went crazy in despair. They laughed crazily and cursed angrily. Some cursed the demons for being despicable and cruel. Some cursed the emperor and the imperial court for being hypocritical and not saving them. Under the threat of death, many people lost their minds and spoke without thinking. However, when the city guards saw this scene, they couldn't get angry at all, and they couldn't blame the people. Everyone's mood became more and more uncomfortable. It was as if a large stone was pressing down on their hearts. They were so angry that they almost couldn't breathe. Soon, 20 breaths of time passed. Seeing that the emperor still hadn't made a decision, the demon emperor waved his sleeve and ordered Demon Commander Dark Knight. Kill. Demon Commander Dark Knight gave the order. Immediately, over 10,000 demon soldiers charged at the people of the human race with swords and sabers. At least 10,000 people were lifted up by the demon soldiers. They waved their swords and sabers, and their necks were cut off. The sound of bones breaking, the sound of corpses falling to the ground, the wails of the dying people, and the terrified screams. All kinds of sounds gathered together and resounded through the night sky. In the blink of an eye, over 10,000 people were slaughtered. Corpses and blood flowed all over the ground. The biting cold northern wind, carrying a thick smell of blood, blew on the walls of Central State City. Countless human soldiers were so angry that their eyes turned red. Their bodies surged with killing intent. Chapter 1433. The Demon King had ordered the slaughter of tens of thousands of civilians in front of the emperor and countless human soldiers. This was a huge blow to the human soldiers and infuriated everyone. No one could endure such humiliation. Any soldier with a bit of courage wanted to go out of the city and fight the demon race. However, this was the situation that the emperor, the imperial tutor, and the various commanders did not want to see the most. If the emperor really opened the city gates and sent his army out to fight, the human soldiers would definitely suffer heavy casualties. The Demon King might even take this opportunity to break into Zhongzhou City and start a massacre. Once Zhongzhou City fell, the human race would be completely finished. There was nothing that could be done. The emperor's expression was extremely cold. He stared at the Demon King with a sharp gaze, his eyes almost shooting out tangible sword light. Ancient Demon King. You don't deserve to be called an ancient demon, nor do you deserve to be called a supreme expert. How dare you use such a despicable and shameless trick? The Demon King stared at the emperor and sneered contemptuously. I am the Demon King, the emperor of the demon race. Of course I am cold-blooded and heartless. I will do anything to achieve my goals. Don't tell me you want to talk about morality with a great devil? Ha ha ha. The Demon King laughed maniacally and waved his sleeves again. Kill again. On the ground, the tens of thousands of demon race soldiers grabbed tens of thousands of civilians and slashed them down. Pff. Heads were chopped off one after another, splattering blood as they rolled on the ground. More than 300,000 civilians were scared out of their wits by this bloody and cruel scene. They screamed and wailed at the top of their lungs. There were even many commoners who lost their minds and rushed out of the crowd without any regard for their own safety, desperately rushing towards the North City Gate. However, as soon as they charged out of the crowd, they were chopped into minced meat by countless flashing blades. Blood splattered all over the ground. What a scene of purgatory on earth! This scene was even more cruel and inhumane than a battle between two armies. The human officers and soldiers on the city wall were all trembling with anger, their teeth clenched so hard that creaking sounds could be heard. Many of the generals could not suppress the emotions of the soldiers and had no choice but to ask their commanders for orders to fight. Undoubtedly, the plot of Versatile Demon Emperor played a great role as it greatly stimulated the human generals and soldiers. The emperor saw that the situation was a little agitated. If he did not think of a way to suppress it, he was afraid that the soldiers would lose control of their emotions. Thus, he stepped into the night sky against the wind and stood proudly above the city gate. He didn't pay attention to the Demon Emperor. His expression was heavy as he looked at the civilians outside the city. With a solemn and respectful voice, he said, "My people, for Central Continent City, and for all of humanity, this emperor cannot send troops to save you. However, I, the imperial tutor the emperor, and all the soldiers of the human race are here to send you off. This emperor will forever remember your sacrifice and this blood feud. This emperor swears to the heavens in the name of my ancestors that I will do everything in my power to avenge all the innocent people who died. Fight the demons to the death." The emperor's dignified and solemn voice resounded clearly throughout the entire area. With that, he bowed deeply to the 300,000 people outside the city. More than 300,000 civilians fell silent. Everyone looked at him in despair. They no longer roared. Instead, they became abnormally quiet and silent. Only tears kept flowing out of their eyes. Above and below the city wall, the million human generals and soldiers all looked at the civilians outside the city with solemn and respectful expressions. At this moment, the eyes of many unyielding men and heroes turned red as tears silently flowed down their cheeks. Everyone remembered this scene. Their hearts were filled with murderous intent. They swore to kill all the demons in the world. In the night sky outside the city, the Versatile Demon Emperor saw the solemn and sorrowful expressions of the human race and laughed loudly again. Ha 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 ha. Human worms, do you see? This is the emperor you worship like a god. What bullshit emperor. This is a complete bastard, a cowardly and useless hypocrite. You still want to work for him? This is ridiculous and shameful. The Versatile Demon Emperor cursed arrogantly and domineeringly, degrading the emperor as if he was worthless. However, the million soldiers and soldiers guarding the city didn't talk, nor did they look at the emperor. Everyone glared at the Versatile Demon Emperor. They wanted nothing more than to kill him with their gazes. The emperor also suppressed his anger and murderous intent. His voice was like a bell as he shouted, "All soldiers prepare for battle." Defend Central State City at all costs. His loud voice spread through half the city. The million soldiers all gripped their weapons and defended with all their might. The versatile demon emperor saw that his scheme had failed. He didn't want to waste any more time. The 300,000 civilians in the wasteland had lost their value. Therefore, he waved his sleeve and sent out a bloody light that covered the sky. It poured down like a tide. Whoosh! The bloody light drowned the 300,000 civilians. Everyone was immediately corroded into skeletons. Boundless blood chi and soul essences converged into a blood cloud that soared into the sky and floated in the night sky. The dozen or so soul refinement realm blood gods hurriedly devoured the bloody cloud to quickly increase their strength. The versatile demon emperor regained his cold and dignified attitude. He ordered, "All soldiers, attack the northern city gate with all your might. Tonight, we will break through Central State City. The first one to kill his way into Central State City will be conferred the title of Demon Commander by this emperor. He will be rewarded with 100 years of cultivation." His majestic and mighty voice spread across hundreds of kilometers of heaven and earth. Millions of demon soldiers were stimulated by these words. Their blood surged, and their fighting spirit and killing intent soared to the sky. Kill! All soldiers move out! Kill all the humans! We will break through Central State City. At least 3 million demon soldiers were the first to attack. Their roars and battle cries resounded through the sky. When the millions of soldiers charged, the earth rumbled as they stepped on it. It was like thunder. The demon army was like a boundless black tide, madly charging at the northern city gate. The final battle that would decide the fate of the human race was about to begin. Tonight was bound to be a night of slaughter with corpses and rivers of blood. But at this time, in the distant northern night sky, golden light, flames, and the dazzling light of magic techniques suddenly lit up the sky. A series of heavy explosions, the sounds of secret techniques colliding, came from 10,000 li away. The sudden upheaval stunned the versatile demon emperor, demon commander Dark Knight, the emperor, and the imperial tutor. All the experts subconsciously looked at the northern night sky with puzzled expressions. They saw that in the night sky 10,000 li away, the light and shadows of magic techniques were colliding. Dazzling light blossomed, illuminating the night sky like it was daytime. It was clear that a large number of experts were fighting in that area. The versatile demon emperor, demon commander Dark Knight, and the others trembled, their expressions changing. "It's our main camp. Damn it! Someone actually attacked our main camp? Bastard! Who would attack at this time?" On the city wall, the emperor and the imperial tutor looked at each other and smiled, as if relieved of a heavy burden. Chapter 1434. To the north of Zhongzhou City, the demon race's camp thousands of miles away was shrouded in a colorful light. Rays of Dharma spells bloomed and lit up the dark night sky. Muffled sounds of collisions and explosions could be heard from the night sky. Although no one could hear the battle cries and didn't know who was fighting, the demon race and the demon race knew that the demon race and the demon race had a clear understanding of who was fighting. However, the Devil Emperor, Demon Commander Dark Knight, and the others all understood that the Devil Race's camp must have been attacked, and the attackers' attacks were very fierce. Only the Emperor and the Imperial Tutor could guess the identity of the attacker. Demon Commander Dark Knight thought for a while, and immediately flew to the front of the ancient Demon Emperor. "Your Majesty, our camp is under attack. Please stay here and I am willing to lead the troops back to help." The ancient Demon Emperor looked at the mighty Demon Race army and saw countless Demon Race soldiers crazily attacking the North City Gate. He frowned and thought for a while. After a while, he ordered in a dignified tone, "No need. Order all troops to stop attacking and return to our camp immediately. This must be Long Xuanquan's plan. If I am not wrong, the ones attacking our camp are most likely the Demon Race and the Water Race's army. After all, we are attacking Zhongzhou City with all our strength and have already suspended the plan to attack the Demon Race and the Water Race. Long Xuanquan is unwilling to admit defeat and will definitely try to resist. Of course, he will ask the Water Race and the Demon Race for reinforcements." After hearing the ancient Demon Emperor's words, Demon Commander Dark Knight didn't refute. He nodded silently and cupped his hands. Then, Demon Commander Dark Knight passed down the order and ordered all the Demon Race soldiers to stop attacking. The Demon Race soldiers were well trained and treated the Demon Emperor like a god. Their efficiency in carrying out orders was also very high. In just a short 15 minutes, the demon race army of more than 3 million retreated like the tide. Outside the North City Gate, there were only white bones and hundreds of thousands of broken bones left on the ground. Not long after, the demon race army of millions left Zhongzhou City under the leadership of the ancient demon emperor and rushed back to the demon race's camp. This tragic battle came to an abrupt end at this point. The millions of soldiers who were guarding the city heaved a sigh of relief as they watched the demon race army leave quickly. The emperor, the imperial tutor, and several commanders stood side by side on the city wall. They looked at the night sky in the north with worried expressions. The demon emperor is indeed calm. To think that he would make a prompt decision to retreat and return to the main camp. What a pity. If the devil emperor were here, we would be able to hold on for a few more days. Take advantage of this opportunity to attack the reinforcements of the demon race's camp. We will definitely achieve glorious results. Not only that, if demon emperor didn't retreat in time, our reinforcements would probably break through the demon camp and bring a heavy loss to the demon camp. Everyone whispered to each other, feeling pity for this. By now, the commanders had already guessed the identity of the reinforcements. At such a critical moment, who else could send reinforcements to the Central Plains other than the Monster Clan and the Water Clan? The imperial tutor hurriedly took out a communication jade slip and quickly sent out the news that the demon army had retreated and the demon emperor had returned to defend the demon camp. He believed that the demon emperor and golden dragon emperor would know what to do after receiving the message. Time passed quickly, and an hour quickly passed. North of the Central Plains city, in the demon race's camp thousands of miles away, the monstrous magic light gradually dimmed and dissipated. By the time the demon emperor led the army back to the camp, the battle had already ended and the attackers had already retreated. The demon race's camp, which was hundreds of miles in radius, was only left with pits and huge cracks, as well as corpses that covered the ground. Most of the corpses belonged to the demon race's soldiers, numbering more than 500,000. However, a quarter of the corpses belonged to the Water Clan and the Monster Clan. Their racial characteristics were very obvious. Demon Commander Dark Knight checked the situation of the camp. After investigating the results, he quickly reported it to the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor was sitting in the Demon Palace. After hearing Demon Commander Dark Knight's report, he immediately frowned. Sure enough, it's the Monster Clan and the Water Clan. These damned bastards, after this Emperor has dealt with the humans, I will take care of them. Dark Knight, pass down the order. The entire army will rest for 3 days and conserve energy. In addition, strengthen the defense of our camp. We can't let the Water Clan and the Monster Clan have another chance to launch a sneak attack. Demon Commander Dark Knight bowed and said yes, then turned and left the Demon Palace. In the next 2 days, Central Continent City was calm and peaceful. The demon race's army seemed to have learned their lesson. They no longer rashly sent troops to attack Central Continent City. They had been holed up in the demon race's camp to recuperate. In Central Continent City, the human soldiers also took the opportunity to rest and recuperate. They repaired the city walls and the buildings in the city, strengthening their defenses. On the evening of the second day, 2 esteemed guests from afar entered Central Continent City. The imperial tutor led a large group of imperial guards to personally welcome the 2 esteemed guests, and led them into the city lord's mansion. In the guest hall, the emperor sat at the head, and the imperial tutor stood at the side. On the left side of the head was a tall middle-aged man. He wore a long robe with golden scales, and a golden crown on his head. His face and expression were very dignified. This person was the leader of the Monster Clan of the West Wilderness, the Heavenly Net Monster Emperor. On the right side of the head was a tall and sturdy Water Clan man. This person wore a golden robe with a flying phoenix dragon pattern, and a luxurious 9-star crown on his head. His square face was upright and dignified, and there was a golden dragon horn on his forehead. He was the leader of the East Seas Water Clan, the famous Golden Dragon Emperor. Obviously, the 3 supreme beings of the 3 races had met here to form an alliance. In addition to the Heavenly Net Demon Emperor and the Golden Dragon Emperor, there were also a few human commanders in the hall. They were Long Yun Xiao, Yun Zhongqi, and Bailey Divine Doctor. After everyone greeted each other, they exchanged a few pleasantries and began to talk about business. The Emperor stood up with a solemn expression, and bowed to the Heavenly Net Demon Emperor and the Golden Dragon Emperor. He said in a sincere tone, Demon Emperor, Dragon Emperor, Thank you for coming to our aid at the critical moment. You attacked the demon race's camp directly and resolved the crisis of Central Continent City. You also solved this Emperor's urgent situation. The Heavenly Net Demon Emperor and the Golden Dragon Emperor nodded slightly, revealing a faint smile. As early as 2 months ago, Your Majesty sent a message asking for our support. We came too late, Your Majesty, please forgive us. As the saying goes, it is better to come at the right time than to come early. We led the army overnight and just happened to see the Demon Emperor attacking Central Continent City. We suddenly had the idea to take the risk and attack the demon race's camp. Emperor may laugh at us, but before we launched the attack, we didn't have much confidence. That's right. After all, we came a long way, and only brought 3 million soldiers. We didn't dare to fight the demon race's army of 10 million. We didn't expect that the Demon Emperor would lead the elite forces to attack Central Continent City, and the demon race's camp was defenseless. That was why we had the opportunity. The Emperor cupped his hands and bowed to the two, and said with a gratified smile, "This Emperor is already very grateful for the two of you coming to our aid at the critical moment." The Water Clan and the demon race's army of several million had traveled for 2 months to reach Central Continent City. They must be tired and slack off. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.